Okay, good to go.
Recording, okay.
We're recording, we're streaming, we are on it. Okay,
Take one, everyone, the planning board meeting for Thursday, July 13th, 2023. Like to get a roll call, to get started. Sergeant Rita,
Rich Rita, ex officio. Mike Copel, member.
Morgan Dean member,
John Racine member.
Jenny Lucas, I'm not quite sure what I am.
You're a
I'm a member.
You were a member.
Okay.
Alan Burko, alternate.
Catherine Brennan, alternate.
Bill Spence, member.
Okay, now I know that. Nancy and Rob are trying to get onto the Zoom,
I don't see them yet, but
so.
I'll let you know when I see them.
Nancy's in the airport, so she might be struggling to get on. Anyways. So let's take a quick look at the minutes. And see what we come up with. Mr. Secretary.
I have a few suggestions. 162.
Right.
Rich Reed reported that the select board held a public hearing. I suggest to discuss the noise ordinance ahead.
Okay,
And on 63, the special town meeting, I think that should be past tense, was held on June 8th.
what number is that, sir?
63. That the special town meeting, I think it should read was held.
But at the time of the minutes.
At that time, the minutes were done.
I
It would
understand
have
that,
been a forward thing, but not a backward thing.
yes, but when this is going to be used, if anybody ever reads this in the future.
No, but it's and I don't hate it as a review, but
I
it is.
defer to your opinion.
This is what happened at that time.
Yep,
That was my.
fine, David,
Leave it.
the plan, 67. The planning board reviewed, I think it should be the membership of the working group. And at 68, they are. On 75, the group's approach is, I think it should read to look at what other towns are, do with regard to special event definition. Now 76. Group talked about requiring an application or permit when certain events are planned in town to ensure support. I think it is, what we meant to say was from businesses.
No, it was four.
It
was
Okay.
four, yeah,
To ensure support for businesses,
yeah.
okay? With respect to traffic and crowd control. '81. And C1 would be developed with commercial properties because developers are demonstrating a preference for faster selling multifamily units. Is that what we intended to say?
I mean, that's what
That's my
Ray-
suggestion.
Yeah, that was Ray's point.
That's Ray's point. Right. I agree with that.
83, changes in the zoning by adding more restrictions on building additional family units in C1. '86. One small development company, comma, which owns the majority of the building land in C1. in line 93, the Forest Service to figure out how to. My suggestion is that it should read, to figure out how to proceed with a plan to locate workforce housing on Forest Service land.
Can you say that one more time?
The Forest Service to figure out how to proceed with a plan to locate workforce housing on Forest Service land.
Does that make it sound like the Forest Service is doing it?
Yep.
The way I read it, it's really not the Forest Service is taking the lead, it's really, I guess it's actually Terrell and the town that's taking the
Right.
lead to work with the Forest Service.
The beginning of the sentence in 92, where Mark Dakota updated the planning board, that the town is in the
Right.
early stages of, and that to me is also a question. It's not the town who's doing this.
The lead is actually, well, it's Terrell / Resort. That's the
So
lead.
then I think we should modify the minutes to say not the town, but that it is,
Well, we're part of the group, but we're not taking the.
Right.
well, Mark Dakota updated the planning board that the town is in the early stages, so there's no mention of Terrell or the.
I don't know, I don't recall what he said. I think you
I
have to go back,
don't always said,
you have to go back and listen to the.
My understanding was that the town was more in a supportive and informational
Yes.
role, but really the leads were forestry
That's-
services.
That's correct.
And
The
Terrell / Resort.
point I'm making is I don't know what Mark actually said, so I don't think.
I don't
we
remember
put
what he said.
Tyrell or Resort in there if he didn't mention.
I didn't draw attention to initially for that reason,
Right.
because I think that the minutes are prepared by listening.
Yep. So Mark was talking about the town and working with the Forest Service and
Okay.
I
Didn't say
mean,
anything about.
I'm happy to go back and do it. That's the gist that I got from listening to him talk about it, that with the town and everybody and they're in the early stages of it and there's not a lot of concrete, but I'm happy to go back and look at it.
My suggestion was that it should read that the working with the Forest Service to figure out how, and my suggestion is to proceed with a plan to locate workforce housing on Forest Service land. Which I think is correct.
Is that what we're going with?
I can look at that. But it's, I don't think that he included, that'll be fine.
Okay.
In line 100 on June 13 at 2 p.m. to plan a visit to Wellhead number 2 and number 3. Good.
On that same line.
Yeah.
It wasn't a plan of visit, that was a date of the actual visit
Okay.
that occurred.
Yeah, earlier on.
With. So I think the wording there is.
Okay, then to say to visit.
I think that's okay. But I also, it's not wellheads number 2 and 3, it's wellheads number 3 and 4, and I may have misspoken in the meeting,
Yeah.
but it should be corrected, I think, to wellheads 2 and 4.
Okay. Yep. It was 2 and 3 in the minute. That's it. It's no apologies. So 3 and 4.
No, that's fine. This is fine. That was a very good meeting. Anything else?
That's enough.
Mike, anything? You got anything?
No, the biggest thing was, but I think Mark did say the town, it's Terrell / Resort.
Okay. Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll move right along.
I think we need a motion.
Yeah, let's get a motion to approve these minutes.
Really, you can make more.
I move to accept the minutes as amended.
I second that one.
All in favor? Rick?
Aye. Aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye.
They're not on there.
Oh. Okay,
Just
Hi,
Kayla,
Tara.
Tara.
can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm not sure if you'd asked the name specifically, but we can hear you.
You want to?
Yeah, I'm just looking at it over, I'm still waiting, I think Nancy might show Rob, Margaret.
Margaret won't be here.
Okay, she's calling it. First, we got that approved, we're okay.
Yes.
Here, copy here.
I think you need to see one.
Yeah, so let me see. Wow, okay. I can change it. Okay, we're all good with the minutes. Move on, so privilege of the floor. I probably should have put this a little bit lower because we have a lot of issues coming up that you're probably the answer. Especially when James comes in to talk. So if you want to say something now, you want to hold off for a moment and we'll come back to you with privilege of the floor. Is that okay with everyone? This is Sonia. Okay.
Yeah, just waiting for the James presentation.
Okay, so just so you know, he's coming about 9:15. I know.
Mhm.
Get another cup of coffee.
So we gotta muddle through an hour's worth of something else that's coming up, so. We'll get through that when James comes about 9:15. Yeah. So if you can step out and come back. But it's gonna be very interesting to hear what's going on right now. You might want to stay. We're looking for better ratings this year, so hang in. So that being said. Tara, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I'm not sure how well you're gonna get my connection.
Okay, so we got you and then. Thank you, Kayla. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yep.
Okay, so you have the floor. Go ahead.
Do you want me to make you, are you gonna show stuff on the screen? Do you need to be a co-host?
That's a good question. Let me ask, do you all have printed copies of the material we sent down? Because if so, then I won't screen share, but if you don't, then I'm happy to.
I didn't print everything. I only printed the new thing Tara sent this morning.
Oh, okay.
But I did send it in an email on, I think, the
And we were
6th.
given stuff last month.
Yeah.
Okay, I can screen share if that works for you guys, and then we can all look at the same thing if that sounds good.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, do that.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I think you all should be seeing this, and you'll see that it has some highlights on it, but they're really just to keep me on point, but I'm sure that won't bother any of you one bit at all. So I'll start by saying, hi, it's nice to be all with you guys all this morning virtually. I think we might have met, at least most of you, kind of in the same format when we did the kickoff meeting for the project back a few months ago. And since that time, we've sort of been hard at work on two kind of avenues of work here on this housing planning project. And one of them was getting out and talking to people in the community and starting to try and get a feel of what is the housing need in Waterville Valley and how does it sort of tie to the success of the really unique resort community you all call home. And the second piece was then digging into what's happened so far. What have you all, done work on in the past several years? And then where can we think about ways to sort of carry that torch forward with new opportunities? So I think kind of our flow for this morning, as far as how we'll present here, is I'm going to just go over some of the highlights of what we heard. We did 10 interviews with different business owners and managers in the community to try and get a feel on what workforce housing kind of means, right? What's going on, what they see as the solutions, how the challenges they see do they sort of impact the business. So I'm going to sort of briefly hit on that. And from there, and that's something, I'm going to back up for a second and say, material wise, that's something that I believe went out to you all in June. So I think it's been around for a little while. But I'll hit on that. And then Tara's going to take a little bit of time to talk through those pieces you all have been working on together over the past few years. And then probably a little bit more of the time we'll spend on something that was sent out to you all by email, which was a document I put together that puts out some of the, I call them sort of areas for action, right? Things you all might think about pursuing as change that we think would be kind of decent recommendations to just get acquainted with them. I think, sort of in full disclosure, it's a lot of information. And so it might be something you all choose to have us come back and talk more about at another meeting, which makes perfect sense because I know this is not the only thing you're up to this morning. So with that, I'm going to jump right in and sort of just give a quick overview of what we heard when we were doing our interviews with the business owners and kind of what that helped us see and how it helped us hone in on where to move forward, some possible ideas. So like I said, you'll see my cheat sheet because I was highlighting it ahead of time. But during the course of our interviews, we saw a handful of themes that sort of came up from several different respondents as we were moving along the way. We had great conversations with everyone, and I ended up with a very sort of long and involved note sheet on what we heard from everyone, but then we tried to synthesize it down to what seemed to be common threads. And a lot of them, I imagine, will not surprise any of you one bit. Some of them might be new, but we generally heard a widespread need for more employees at businesses. A lot of businesses noted that services or hours have been reduced for the business, or they have not been able to move forward with some expansion they've been hoping to do, be that like physical expansion or expanding their hours that they were open or what exactly they were providing at their business. And many of them attribute that specifically to finding consistent workforce who can be sort of reliable and accountable to those businesses. Another piece that came up is, strangely enough, the idea of 100 units came up from a number of people. So it was interesting. No one business feels like they need 100 units, but a lot of the folks I talked to did sort of point out this idea that there seems to be a need for maybe about 100 options for people, right? 100 units to support the workforce might feel like a number that they think would help not only them meet their needs, but then also see their neighbor businesses be able to meet their needs. And, that's sort of an anecdotal number, but when you hear it from a handful of people, it makes me think that there's either a conversation going on around that, or there is sort of an idea that there is some balance point of how many units might be needed. So I put that in there because it's, I think, interesting to think about is, where is the opportunity to create something potentially at that scale, be it in one place or in a few different ones. We also heard that a lot of the workforce in the Valley is seasonal, but that there is a core year-round backbone to this workforce here. And that is really a very important piece to the success of the businesses. They all kind of see that they see a mix of, seasonal influx needing to up staff and having seasonal and part-time staff there to fill those is great, but that all the businesses really sort of see a need to have a consistent year-round full-time workforce, because several of the businesses, describe challenges with staffing, right? With the idea that when folks are all sort of coming at it as a part-time job or seasonally, they spend a lot of extra time in management stitching together coverage for all of their open hours, and then often find gaps where they're closing the doors or, closing up shop for the day. And many of them noted that a better, more consistent year-round sort of backbone, we're calling it, workforce is essential to seeing continuity of their services. One thing I think is sort of nice to hear or unique to hear, and I've been very happy to get to know your community a little bit and get to see this, is the businesses all really see each other as integral to the success of the community overall, right? That the importance of having a good corner store is everything to the resort and back and forth, right? That these businesses really see that you need to have all of those pieces in place for a resort community to thrive. And that's a lot of just cooperative nature. I think that it's really interesting and unique to see. More specific to the housing piece, right? I tried to ask people a bit about how staffing and housing tie to their work today, but what do they also see as opportunities, right? Because our goal here is to see how to sort of dribble forward. Is that many of them noted that they feel like it's a diversity of different housing needs that they have, which means a diversity of different housing types, right? So some said short-term, month-to-month rentals are a good solution when the seasonal swells happen, but that they also need places like permanent starter homes, right? The starter homes of the 1950s, 60s, we all used to talk about, for young families to sort of start to build out that backbone year-round workforce and have opportunities. Many of them sort of noted that the challenge, right, the drive up into the valley, those transportation pieces can be a barrier to just reliability of staff on showing up in shifts, and having sort of opportunities a little closer in the valley itself would help them have a little bit more predictability about, less call outs for weather or, I just can't make it because I have to go in a different direction and the commute balance isn't really going to work. I think it was really interesting to hear how many local businesses have already pursued their own local solutions. So I spoke to some restaurant owners who have purchased apartments to staff, to house staff. I've also talked to hotels who have turned rooms into housing for their employees instead of lodging. And I think it's commendable to see them do that, but at the same time, it makes sense to me, right? Business owners, so far as I see them, are day-to-day problem solvers. And so when many of them have found themselves in this problem situation, they've found what resources they can to be a solution, but none of them sort of see those solutions as being golden tickets or very productive for them. Particularly as an example in that avenue of a hotel owner who takes a handful of rooms offline to turn them into places to stay for the housekeepers and things like that. They then, specifically called out when I was talking to them that that's lost revenue though overall, right? Those are rooms that are not able to be tourist accommodations and cut into sort of the success and viability of that business. It's important for them to have done it, but it's not something that they would like to see as being their permanent solution. They would like to see it be something where their employees can just have housing within a reasonable distance of work and make that work where they can use all of their, rentable space for rentable space. There was some consensus. So like I said, I talked a bit about solutions. There was a bit of consensus that it would be nice to see sort of one solution come on board, right? Something of, I'm going to call it like a moderate scale, but there was a lot of talk of, wouldn't it be nice if, interest in this Forest Service possible solution came up quite a bit, but also, in concept, the idea was a place where it could be separated a little bit perhaps from some of the other neighborhoods in town, but that this workforce housing kind of area needs to have a little bit of mix or diversity of its own, right? It needs to have places where the seasonal folks who are running the lifts at the ski area can be a little bit noisier perhaps, right? But then also a place where somebody who's managing something might be able to be with their young children and not have a lot of conflict about that neighbor issue. So there was a lot of talk of, wouldn't it be nice to see a development come online that had a mix of different things, right? That had some smaller homes and duplexes and some apartment style pieces, but a little bit of a mix so people felt like there was something that really fit their needs or their interests or what would feel like a good place to stay at the time. On the sort of flip side of that coin, there was also a concern that something like that, right, a centralized solution could potentially lead to a little bit of, I don't know, concentration, I guess, in a way that might start to make it feel like a negative impact on the community, right? If that place sort of now becomes known as being a ruckus, noisy neighborhood, then that might not be great to sort of have it concentrated. It might be sort of creating this sort of like college town feeling in a part of your community. And so there was a little bit of a flip side of the coin, right? People were seeing the pros of seeing that being one sort of concentrated place, but also seeing that there could be some negatives with that too. So a little bit of discussion on it at least, but I think we heard from people on both sides of that point of view. One thing I think is sort of a key takeaway is that solutions that create housing specifically for the workforce are essential. And I don't think that is probably a surprise to anybody around the table, but the workforce tethered, employed in Waterville Valley tends to have a lower income than, say, some of your folks who are coming from away to either make seasonal or permanent homes in the community. And making sure that there's a way to sort of target units towards this need for that workforce seemed very important to the businesses. One specific tool we asked people about was accessory dwelling units, right? And those are those smaller units attached to like a main single family home in your ordinance today. And there was a little bit of a mixed point of view on those from a few different pieces, right? Some people thought they might not actually just be marketable, right? Folks might not really want to build them. There were a couple of comments towards the point of view of, many of our single family homeowners in the community might not really feel a need to build an accessory apartment, particularly if it was going to go for the workforce. They may have an interest in building one for, say, a short-term rental, but there are a few people who said, geez, I'm just not sure that they would actually get built. One thing that I did sort of take away from this was when we were talking about those accessory units, that having sort of it'd be important to really understand who those tenants were and making sure that we had a good kind of support system there where we could understand who those units were going to be available to and, how it could potentially tie to this need the community seems to see for workforce housing. One thing I'll sort of add in here is I also heard a bit about making sure that they looked and felt compatible with the neighborhoods, right? That folks really didn't like the idea perhaps of seeing there just be some random little building put in the backyard, but that perhaps if they were designed right and they were, fit this sort of narrower margin of how they looked and interacted with the neighbor's property and the main house, that they would sort of be a little bit more palatable and they would feel probably like a better solution. Like I said, we talked about sort of places for housing and the White Mountain National Forest land came up, but I know that's something you all are aware of, and we sort of just have to see how that plot thickens over time. The last sort of piece I'll say on what we heard was for many of, the employees and for many of the employers, they explained to me that there's a really unique and vibrant and charismatic feeling to Waterville Valley, and that a lot of the sort of vibrancy of that comes from having a workforce who can live in the community. So we talked a bit about how land is cheaper in Campton and Thornton, and perhaps it's easier to see housing that's affordable to the workforce show up there. And market-wise, that seems to be fundamentally true, right? But a lot of the businesses specifically sort of called out this idea that, but having that workforce in the community itself adds so much to the sense of liveliness and the vibrancy that can make it a really attractive place. So it's kind of an important thing to work towards. So that's a little bit about what we heard. And with that, I guess I'd pause and ask if you all have any questions or comments you want to say right on that, or we can hand things over to Tara to jump into the, summary of where we sit.
I have a question, it's Mike Capel. It would seem to me, number one, I've been involved in a lot of hotel projects, and it is not at all uncommon in any hotel to have specific rooms set aside for workers. That's very common in a hotel. That's number one. Number two, I want to know what you are doing to assist us with the National Forest Service project, because I think that's the thing that makes the most sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm happy to sort of comment to both of those. I think I agree with you on the hotel piece. I think it's something I have seen hotels do. I mean, I spent a lot of my 20s on Martha's Vineyard, which is a place that has a very similar sort of tourist balance to it. And I have seen that practice used over and over again. I think one piece to remember is that hotels are sort of uniquely situated to provide some living accommodations. They might be a little bit, I'll be honest with you, potentially substandard, right? If they don't have like a kitchen or something like that. But other businesses, restaurants, particularly, other businesses in the community, your ski and snow shop, rental stores, places like that, retail, they don't have that same opportunity for them. And so that's kind of where it does get a little, depending on the type of businesses, they all have different sort of assets.
I understand that, but the comment was, the comment you seem to make is that was an unusual situation. And as you just said, it's not a very common situation, especially in we're obviously not an island like Nantucket or not Dominion, but to some degree, we are an island. We consider ourselves an island because of 41. But I think the key here really is, what can we do to help get the October 1st deadline with the Forest Service? What can we do to get that extended? Because I think that is the best solution for a workforce housing development, or whatever you want to call it. What can we do to try and make that happen? I've spoken to some people in DC, and I'm curious what your suggestion is.
Yeah, so I'll be honest with you, I wish I had sort of a clearer suggestion for you at the moment. We are a supporter sort of to Mark in town hall behind the scenes on how to move that forward. And we're here with, time to help on it. We have not dug too far into it at this point. We've been sort of seeing how things unfold, but I do think, it's certainly, I think, a really good opportunity you guys see in front of yourselves, and we're here to help with it. I can't say that I have done much on it right now.
I can add to that as well. So Mike, I've been in touch with Mark as he's had the meetings with the lawyers and Forest Service and resort, and the plan has been for Kayla and I and Mark to sit down together when there's a concept plan from the resort for that housing. And we actually have quite a few hours in this grant set aside to do whatever we can do to help move that forward when the time is right. Critical, because these grant funds that are paying Kayla and I have to be used by next June. So extending the October 1st for them might mean we don't have funds to help the town adjust plans for the solid waste and water and wastewater and whatnot to go with it. But we're staying on top of it so that we're ready to help when the time is right.
I don't think it's
We're losing you, the connection.
You're slurring.
She's at a camp out in the wilderness. So. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm talking to too, so
Oh, okay.
I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah.
I guess my question. My understanding of the October first deadline, current October first deadline. Is that it's legislative, not regulatory. And that being the case, what can anybody do to assist? And we're not the only ones that are having this problem based on what I found. But what can we do to try and get that legislative deadline extended? And there are things that we can do. I just was curious if anybody over there is assisting or can give us ideas other than the ones that I got out of these two.
I think that's a good question to ask Jamie and do it.
Okay. No, I
As they're taking the lead in this, and so we're integrating whatever efforts, whatever support efforts that the town can provide with Tyrell and Resort on the workforce housing and support service. So, last time James mentioned to the select board, they're still working on things such as a concept plan. They're well aware of the deadline.
Yeah.
So he may have an update.
I can give you one.
Yeah, that's man.
So we have an exceptional,
Could you identify yourself? please?
oh yeah, Tim Smith, President General Manager of Waterville Valley Resort. We've been working with a consulting group. They've produced a draft of the prospectus and plan. It's very rough. It's the first draft that we've gone through. We reviewed it. We've got it out to a couple other groups that we're working with for some feedback on it. So that's currently where we're at with the prospectus and the development plan. When it comes to the October deadline, there's the way that the farm bill is written, that we have to make significant progress towards it, basically meaning we have to have a lease. There isn't a road, there isn't a forward path for that yet. We were hoping that the Dillon project would have that path set by now. However, the Dillon project has been held up through some conflicts in the planning process that have come up between two entities, not forest. But so that's been installed. So the progress right now with using the 2018 Farm Bill language is somewhat stalled. It's not foreseeable that either ours or theirs would get to at least before October 1st. So at this time, the most important thing to do is go to agriculture.senate.gov and educate yourselves on what the Farm Bill legislation is and continue to legislate for that Farm Bill. There's a website right there with a form and Farm Bill email address that you guys can write letters to, and the concerned community can write letters to. That's the best way to get that out there. Also, it's a Senate House committee, so the senators that we have locally, we can write letters to the senators and express our interest in how we're moving this forward.
That what I was told, and when I spoke to my friends or contacts, whatever the hell they are, down in DC is, and they said it jokingly, senators and congresspeople respond when hundreds of contacts come into them.
Yeah.
And you know, what Tim is saying is very important, that we strongly encourage, I don't know if we can do that, but we strongly encourage our residents, voters, friends, etc., to go online and kind of send things off to our two senators, asking that this be extended.
Yeah.
For, you know, but they said to me, sending for a year would be a big deal. So, but extending it for at least a deal, like a year, I don't know, we are allowed, not a year, but not, I don't know if that's something you can recommend to the population and how we would do that. But in order to get this done, pushing those people, not pushing the wrong word. Suggest, engaging with, especially our senators, and our congressperson, how important this is to Waterville Valley. Would be a good thing for, what are the 400 odd voters to do.
So I would, the Ski New Hampshire, obviously, we're working through Ski New Hampshire, which is a collaborative of the ski resorts for the state of New Hampshire. We've been working with them to try to help make sure that this doesn't go away in the 2023 Farm Bill, which we don't expect it to. There's no, if anything, we could get enhancement. Under Secretary Wilkes, who I met with at the NSAA National Convention, he asked for suggestions. My main suggestion is helping fund the planning process. The way that these developments come online is it takes a lot of funding to plan. It's this, everybody here, it's the consultants, it's everything that the developers, it takes a lot of money to plan. Thankfully, you know, the Tyrell and Waterville Valley Resort has been running towards that planning so far. But this is going to be a long process. This will be the first in the nation if we can get it done. I think we have a very good chance of doing it. Because of this community that we have. The thing that's holding up the Dillon is the community. Because our community all sees this as a really great stepping stone for our community. I think we have a good chance at it, so I highly encourage it.
What's the Dillon?
There's a project in Dillon that they're trying to use administrative site of the White River National Forest. That project has been it's been going on for years and years. And it's a little bit, the town is trying to put the housing in, but the part of the housing project is county, so the county's involved. So the town, the county, the resort community, and the forest are all involved. So it's just a little bit of, you know, tidying up the planning process for who's going to take care of that. And that's what's been somewhat hard. Also, there's no roadmap for this. No one has used this yet. So that has forged away. And White River National Forest is really good. They're really progressive because of all the ski resorts and all of the, you know, the tourism economy that they have there. So they're very proactive. They charge forward and they're right there. We thought forever that the lease was going to be any day. And we found out that there is some conflicts, so we don't have a big, a clear path forward on that one before October 1st. So, but still working it.
On the influencing of legislature side of things, I was going to just add in quickly that is absolutely something for residents to do. Regional planning commissions, like where I work for, and the town itself, we're actually not allowed to try and influence legislation of that nature, but voters are, right? So that's like you're saying, that's really a call to action for sort of everybody in your community, friends, you know, the individuals.
But you can tell us how to do it.
I absolutely can. And Tim is spot on, and so are you, right?
If you can tell us how to, what I'm asking, all right, is I understand what you can and cannot do. But you can assist us in how to do it. And I guess that's where I'm looking at, because this is very nice, but in order to get that done, and I've read the proposed bill and all the rest of that stuff. Funny things happen in legislative things get added, dropped, changed, whatever. We Waterville people and others, right, that are involved around the states should be, we used to say rock it down, I don't think it's time. But talking to and emailing and writing to our senators, especially in this case, as well as our congressperson, how important that is to Waterville Valley. And them getting several hundred of these would help you.
And they know Secretary Wilkes, Undersecretary Wilkes was commenting on how there's money set aside for this. They're looking for projects that will be able to move forward. So when we talk about this, we have a pilot project. That's the term we want to use. We're looking for the help with the planning process and really making sure, because the forest is the one that brought the opportunity to us. And let's be clear on that this wasn't an opportunity we brought to them, they brought to us. And so they're very engaged and they want to make this happen. So what they're looking for is how do we make this happen? Where's the holdups? And so the pilot project is what we want to bring attention to.
Can you help us?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
Draft
can you
it.
help us?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, I have done this as well. You're closer to the specific language here, to the specific language that we should be getting our residents to send to our senators and congressperson, as well as from anybody else. Them getting several hundred of these would help ensure that it stays in the farm.
Sure.
Students, trying
So, pick a moment, or I'm gonna seek, let's see, Rich has to leave. So let me seek, Kathy. Okay. Kayla, go ahead.
Sure, yeah. So I'll add one little piece because I think it is sort of useful to your point of what can we do to help you, right? So we can't use any public money, which is what pays for sort of our time here in this one, to do something specific. But what I will tell you is that something we gave you in June, I think would be a really good piece to use to circulate for the talking points of what the issues are, right? That conversation I just sort of led you through, you guys actually all have that as a written up resource with those bullet points of what the impact is. And so I'd say circulate those wide, right? If you want people to talk to the point of how this impacts the overall economic health of your community, feel free to circulate that to people, right? And you can tease out those pieces because we're working for a different aim, but you can absolutely use that information to feed in, and it's yours to publicly circulate. So shifting gears quickly to sort of the where we have been or where you all have been. Tara got kicked out because of her internet challenges, so I'm going to pinch hit for her a bit on this and go through a little bit of a summary of where things sit today based on the last few years. So I'm going to throw another document up on the screen share here. Okay, so this was sent out to you all in email, but it's a summary that Tara put together of the work that has been done by you all over the past few years, because this is something that, as she says here, has been a multi-year project to try and review and go over the town's land use regulations with a couple of different goals in mind. So I'm going to just sort of skim through this quickly, time being of the essence, I understand. Site plan review regulations. So back in 2019, so looking back 3.5 years ago or so, or I guess 4 even now, you all amended the site plan regulations to do some housekeeping cleanup. And the goal of those was to add some language that exempted home occupations and incidental installations, so things like bike racks, bus shelters, fences, benches, from having to go through site plan review. That makes things smoother and easier for people. You also added a low-cost, more streamlined process for minor changes to site plans, making it so that folks didn't have to go through the full suite of site plan review to make minor adjustments to their plans. Those things all, in the big picture, make it easier for minor changes and developments to go forward. And then looking forward to 2020, you all amended your subdivision regulations with a few different goals in mind here, right? To revise the definitions, types of access, allowing, clarifying things around driveways, allowing common driveways, standards for internal roads and streets, with the goal of sort of reducing cost and runoff, stormwater runoff. The minimum width for shared driveways was reduced from 18 feet down to 12 feet. So bringing down the overall amount of impervious surface that's going on and the cost of pavement to make those happen. Similarly, the rights of ways for local roads was narrowed from 50 feet down to 40 for those local roads and the rights of ways underneath them. So that had sort of a public and a private component to it. The internal roads were changed so that they don't have to require their own separate right of way. So if you're creating an internal road on a site for development, it doesn't need its own platted right of way underneath any longer. You can just put in that road. And details were added for the process of retaining a road as private and making sure that they're well maintained, which all sort of go to the overall maintenance and upkeep of neighborhoods, making that smoother for people. When it comes to the zoning ordinance, changes have been put forward here over a few town meetings, right? So what Tara talks about here is what was done in the 2019 and 2020 town meetings. And the sort of highlights on this were that the provision passed to allow the planning board to approve planned unit developments, which we love acronyms, right? So we call a PUD in the high density residential district, in the village commercial district, in the commercial 1 district. And that just basically gives more flexibility in site design. It also worked to sort of simplify the process and the requirements, eliminating sort of extra steps for select board review in there, which reducing costs and burden, along the way and getting these things permitted. So it opened up more opportunity. You also work to reduce all the setbacks in the commercial 1 district, and that helps enable a more walkable, denser village center to come together by not requiring things to be set so far back from the streets or side property lines in places you didn't really want them to in the end of the day. There was also something put in place to enable the planning board to provide flexibility in parking plans. And this would allow y'all to use public lots, designated on-street parking, shared parking. It basically gave people an easier, more flexible way to provide parking for a development on the site instead of necessarily having that parking off-site on their off-street on their property locating. And that makes it much easier to develop sort of medium and smaller sized sites. There was also an effort to remove the minimum 30-foot distance between buildings. So those were what was successful in passing in town meeting in 2019 and 2020. It's also worth talking about a provision that was put forward that didn't pass town meeting. So back in 2019, there was an amendment to encourage a higher density of residential development in the village commercial district. And the mechanism to do this was to eliminate the minimum lot size and maximum lot coverage for residential uses, and to bring down the open space requirements for residential uses in that district to the same as the other uses in the district. But those did not pass, right? Right now, right, the residential uses require more open space in your village commercial district than other uses, and that was something that was not successfully passed through town meeting. And we learned from those things. In addition, multifamily dwellings, oops, sorry, I'm reading from the wrong place. This is me pinch hitting for Tara, so bear with me. The requirements of sort of having this can sort of needlessly, the extra open space requirements can sometimes needlessly require or remove acreage, remove land on the site from being potentially developed. And it can be a little bit of a barrier to seeing denser development that you often can tie to a successful and vibrant town center. Coming a little bit more forward in 2021, like I said, this has been a multi-year effort you all have been at. In 2021, the town meeting amendments were aimed at addressing neighborhood and local official concerns regarding the growing number of dwelling units being used as short-term rentals and encouraging homeowners to make rooms available to seasonal or year-round employees. So to do this, there was some revision and clarification to the definitions, right? Definitions related to lodging, defining transient in your ordinance, and adding short-term rentals as a permitted use so that the select board can then have some basic safety requirements and do a bit of permitting around them. It also encouraged homeowners to use 1 or 2 rooms in their home for a non-transient use by putting in an accessory use, allowing folks to rent out a minor portion of their home, those 1 or 2 rooms, for, like we're saying, seasonal workforce, a long-term workforce, or somebody else to move into the community. You all have also been doing a recent master plan update. You've been a very busy planning board so far as I can see. And Tara calls out a handful of opportunities that have come up in that recent master plan update for ways to think about addressing this lack of workforce housing. And through that master planning process, it seems it was agreed that these were things worth exploring more before you could get a good direction on exactly where to move. And that's where this project really comes in, right, is to try and explore some of those areas a bit more with you all and with the community. Some of the possibilities that came up during that master plan update were allowing detached accessory dwelling units. So this would be accessory dwelling units that don't have to share a common wall with the main building on the property. They tend to be the sort of guest cottage structures people think about. There's also a bit of talk about exploring this idea of cottage community options in your planned unit development ordinance. So that's cottage communities are a pretty specific tool. They're in some ways very old and in some ways sort of new. So they're kind of coming through a new little renaissance of their own, but it's this idea of having smaller, tighter neighborhoods of smaller homes as a way to get a little bit of efficiency and bring down the cost. You can allow density bonuses for them. So allowing sort of that typical density you all use of 1 dwelling unit per half acre in most of your zones, and giving them a little bit more flexibility to make smaller lots because the homes would be smaller and sort of intentionally designed and laid out in a neighborhood setting. Another thing that was put out as a possible opportunity to explore was a special exception or a conditional use permit that would allow lots in the rec district, the recreational zoning district you all have, to use a limited amount of their land to develop some targeted workforce housing. So the last sort of piece I think that doesn't go towards regulatory steps is just the context as a whole, right? And in Tara's write-up, she talks a bit about that limited land available for development. There's very limited land in Waterville Valley for development, period, due to the wonderful presence of the White Mountain National Forest. But other than the rec zoning district, most of the land that is still available for development, not already built out, is in your village commercial and your commercial 1 zoning districts. So as we continue to talk about sort of this concern about workforce housing, we also hear and need to remember to balance this need to see commercial development have its space to grow, in your commercial 1 district, in your village center district, because that context of limited land just means it's in hot supply and a decent amount of competition for whatever the use may be. So I'm going to pull down that screen share. And I'm going to say, so the context of that, right, is to just sort of set forward kind of where we play things forward from. And if it's okay with you all, I'm going to just jump right into the fresh audit, unless there's anything anyone wants to say sort of specifically about Tara's progress to date memo. All right, so getting something else up on the screen share. We're gonna go here. Okay, so one task for me in this project was to take a fresh set of eyes at the ordinance, knowing what you guys have already worked on, right? And so what I've kind of given you all here, and this was sent out by email to you all, is a list of there's really 7 places I kind of call areas for action, like 7 things to think about pursuing. Some of them have a couple of different strategies we can see as, maybe viable in the community. I think, this is a lot to talk through, and I know that you all have other business to do this morning. So what I really want to do here is just introduce this to you a bit, and then hopefully we can just pick this up at another meeting with a little more time and sort of pick it up from here with more time to think about. But I want to introduce it to you all, answer a couple of questions if people have them, and really just make it something for you all to have an opportunity to continue to think through and chew on about what feels like it would maybe be a good fit, what feels like it might not, and what would be important along the way. So my area for action A, right, the first thing we have listed here is to consider strategies that are going to spur high density development in your village commercial district. So one thing we can see in sort of development patterns is that village commercial zoning districts tend to be a place where you can have a mix of different uses, right? And they also tend to be a place where you can achieve a bit of density and where it's wanted, right? And what we see happening in Waterville Valley is that that density is potentially not occurring. And new development in the village commercial zone, we've heard, has sometimes gone to just single family and 2-family homes. And when we do that, the opportunity with, such limited land to get more density, to see an opportunity for workforce housing, and to continue to sort of build out this tight, dense, vibrant core gets lost because, like we said, there's limited land and the competition for it is hot. So there's a couple of different strategies I want to sort of plant a seed for you all to think about on how to, spur that higher density growth in your village commercial district. One of them is to eliminate single family and 2-family dwelling units as allowed uses in this district. So, sort of honestly, just hitting the nail squarely on the head. If we want to see that denser type of development occur here, and we're finding that market pressures and sort of income disparity and differences aside are leading them towards single family and 2-family homes, then maybe perhaps we just remove those as allowed uses in the district to make it so that the residential development that would come forward here would have to be multifamily development. And in that way, you can ensure that basically there's some little minimum level of density established here, that you will not see those lots go to just a single family home, but would at a very minimum provide, a multifamily project or a mixed use project. I'm not going to sort of spend time going through under each one of these strategies. I call out some observations, right? Just things we observed along the way. And then some things to consider, right? Things about what this would accomplish, what you have to kind of be careful about, and then a little bit of needs and context. So, I invite you all to read those a bit before we come together to talk about them more. But really, that is sort of the heart of this first strategy, would be to remove those single family and 2-family uses as allowed uses in the district. And that way, making sure that any residential development that comes in is multifamily or is multifamily with some mixed use commercial alongside it as well. A second strategy to help sort of increase and spur higher density development in that village commercial zone would be to change the way that we regulate. And this, I actually am going to widen this here to talk about the village commercial and the commercial 1 district. So it's a bit of a change of the way that we regulate it to regulate with a minimum density rather than a maximum density. So a lot of times in our ordinances, we set sort of a maximum amount of density, and very rarely do we create a minimum amount of density, because oftentimes economics alone just drive us to sort of the highest and best use of properties. People tend to do what is most economically viable on that project to do. But, in Waterville Valley, it's a very unique scenario, and that's not always necessarily, where things lead. So one approach might be to establish a minimum density. And the way you would do this, or one way to think about doing this, is to work with something that is similar to a setback, but it's almost sort of like the opposite of a setback. It is, right, so a setback, and I'm talking to a planning board, so you all know this already, but is the distance you have to be from a property line or from a right-of-way line. And alternatively to that, something that communities use when they want to see a higher density come in, and they want to see something that makes more walkable development that's built a little closer to the streets and sort of more maximizes the build out of lots, is to use a minimum, wherein you basically have build to lines, is what they're called, instead of a setback line. And a build to line says any building on this property must come at least to, and then you set a distance, 10 feet from the right of way, 15 feet. You set the same on side property lines, and you basically, instead of coming at it the way you do usually with a setback, where you require it to be set back a certain distance, you also require it to come forward a certain distance. And in doing so, because of sort of the size and nature of lots, you tend to spur more of this mixed use and multifamily development. It also tends to lead towards more walkable development. And so this is another strategy that helps sort of spur that higher density development. Shifting gears a little bit to what I'm going to call our action area B, right? But this is really just me making an outline so we can have some order to discuss things. There's a tool which you all may be familiar with and may not. It's called inclusionary zoning. And inclusionary zoning is a piece of regulation. It's enabled in the state of New Hampshire as like an incentive where you can, for a certain amount of development to come online that is affordable to a workforce or at a certain price point, you provide a density bonus for it. So, for example, if a lot could say support, let's use simple, easy numbers, right? 10 multifamily units on it based on the setbacks and the open space requirements you all use to regulate some density. Say that could provide 10, you can actually put a provision in place that says, if you are going to make a certain share of that development available to the workforce, available and affordable to the workforce, we'll give you a density bonus. So instead of being able to build 10 units there, we're going to let you build 13 units there. But 3 of those units are going to be required to be affordable to the workforce. And this is something that has been well practiced in states to our south. So Massachusetts does this as well. They have an inclusionary zoning program. Theirs can actually be a requirement. I am familiar with using them in the state of Rhode Island, where they can also be a requirement, where you can say a development must provide a minimum of 20 or 30% of the housing to be affordable. In New Hampshire, it's an incentive, so people can opt in or opt out, but putting that density bonus in place for people can allow somebody to get a good return on their investment and also provide workforce housing, which can be a sort of a sweet spot for developers, especially if you promote these programs well. So this is action area B. It's something you can consider doing in your high density residential, perhaps your village commercial, your commercial 1 districts. Moving on to sort of idea number 3 in action area C is, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about doing more of a scattered site approach to development. One thing I think we sort of know about spurring affordability of housing, getting some workforce housing to show up in a community is usually takes more than one strategy to make it work. Not in every case, right? But a lot of times it's about having sort of a menu of options that feel suitable for people so that you're not banking on a handful of property owners to pull something off, but you're opening up opportunities for a wider pool of people to try and be part of the solution. And scattered site, small scale development is a good way to do it. And the way I'm going to introduce those here is through a tool you already know, right? Those accessory dwelling units. In your ordinances, you refer to these as 2-family residential structures. I'm going to refer to them in sort of this more general term as accessory dwelling units. And a couple of ways to sort of pursue or promote this type of development is to allow for detached accessory dwelling units. It's something, based on Tara's memo, I think you all have talked about it a bit before and been sort of not sure if you were ready to move forward on it or how to make it, successful or make sure it was going to fit in your community. And one thing I'll say here is, so I think something we should spend a bit of time talking about is that these can often be a pretty useful tool, and allowing them to be detached has certain benefits. A lot of times people don't like to share walls, frankly. And many times when we think about these accessory apartments, we think about that guest cottage or, the apartment above the garage. And in today, unless that guest cottage is attached to your home, which is really kind of no longer a guest cottage, or your garage is attached to your house, you're not able to sort of pursue that type of development. And they can be really a very easy way to open up some opportunities for housing that's integrated in your community already and not super centralized. I think an important piece perhaps to think about in your community would be what I'm going to call a lookbook on these, which is a design guideline. So sometimes people get concerned in single family, zoning areas or single family neighborhoods that these accessory apartments might make your neighborhood feel really different. And if they were sort of looking at sort of just another small house in the backyard, what might that look like? Is, what's going to be the sort of presentation of it? How is it going to sort of interact with its neighbors and with the main house? And I have seen these be very successful when you establish kind of a design guideline or a lookbook of how they are allowed to look, and making sure that they come online to appear like a guest cottage or to fit the sort of aesthetic that seems appropriate in Waterville Valley, and not just turn into sort of a strangely different modern looking little tiny house in the backyard if that's not what you want to see come forward. So I think it's something to think about, looking out as an opportunity, and that if there's concern about the way that opportunity visually presents itself, developing some design guidelines and really a lookbook that shows people examples right in your ordinance of what these things should and can look like can really make that much more palatable to your neighborhoods. A second strategy around this, and this is sort of a nuts and bolts, but I'm a nuts and bolts zoning person. I think many times our zoning ordinance has little provisions that can be harder to comply with than people think. So strategy number 2 around these accessory units would be to reduce some of the parking requirements for these accessory units. Not overall, but when I read the ordinance, I realized that for multifamily projects, there's like a little bit of a gradation, right? The number of bedrooms ties to the parking spaces required. But if, for example, a multifamily development is coming online with 2-bedroom apartments, it actually requires 1.5 parking spaces per unit. However, if you were in your sort of low density residential or your high density residential, and you were putting in today one of those attached accessory apartments, you need to have 2 parking spaces for that one attached accessory apartment. And that kind of leads to 2 things. One, it makes it more visually impactful on the neighbors, because if you think about that, the single family home itself, right, requires 2 parking spaces. And then the accessory apartment also requires 2 parking spaces. 4 parking spaces is in some places kind of a little bit of a tiny parking lot, right? And that might not feel like a nice piece to see as your neighbor. It also is pretty unlikely that you really need 2 parking spaces for that accessory unit. Oftentimes it's a single person in there. And so you may find that you're able to reduce the parking requirements for those accessory units down to 1 or 1.5. Really 1, I think, makes sense, because 1.5 doesn't really mean anything because you can only have 1 on a lot, right? So I think whole numbers is better here. But reducing it down to 1 parking space, that helps you reduce stormwater runoff and the amount of like impervious surface for that paved or gravel area. And it also helps reduce the visual impact. And it makes it so that if you don't need those 4 parking spaces, you're not putting them in, which kind of makes it an easier neighbor and an easier sell to your neighborhood. All right, and I'm going through these at warp speed, so bear with me. A next action area, right, we're in sort of area D here now, is to restrict residential development in your commercial 1 zoning district to only workforce housing units or units barred from use as timeshares or short-term rentals, and requiring them to be developed in upper stories in mixed-use structures. So that is a very regulatory sounding sentence. The gist of the sort of intention here is we understand this really important balance between making sure that there's space for commercial development to thrive, right? And the commercial 1 district is certainly the heart of that space in Waterville Valley. And in this way, what you would do is require that any residential development that goes into that commercial 1 district be above a first floor of commercial or other use, right? And in that way, you're making sure that every property in that commercial one zoning district is providing an opportunity for commercial growth, but that you're also able to use the upper stories for residential, which is, as we all know, I mean, living anywhere in New England, that's a tried and true sort of way downtowns really work, is to have residential up above those businesses. It adds to vibrancy. It makes it very easy to get density and scale. And so we think that that's a great structure, or great sort of regulatory structure to pursue in Waterville Valley. And I think it's important here that really it's about making sure that those units get tied to being available as long-term housing. So ideally, right, as workforce housing, tying it specifically to that, but at a minimum, barring short-term rentals in those spaces to make sure that you don't sort of just create tourist accommodations in this regulatory scheme and not actually get to the heart of the workforce housing challenge. Another area for us to think about goes to something that I think you all talked about or explored a little bit in the master plan process, which are those cottage communities. And I love cottage communities. I have seen them be wildly successful in lots of places. And I think, like I said, they're an old tool that has come back again. You know, when you look at a lot of old neighborhoods, they very much are laid out this way, but we got away from them in our sort of zoning world for a long time. And now it seems to me in the last sort of 10 or so years, we're circling back to them. And what these cottage communities are, right? And we would propose putting them forward in sort of your planned unit development structure of your ordinance, is they allow for that smaller lot size, or to allow people to put multiple independent structures on a lot. So instead of having multifamily in a cottage community be one building with multiple units, allowing it to be multiple smaller units on the same property without needing to split out individual lots, or creating smaller individual lots. There's flexibility, right? Regulations are best when developers or people who want to do something have some flexibility on the best way to approach it, but letting there be these smaller lot sizes. The important piece here is tying it to sort of the size of the units being built, right? That these smaller lot sizes, this ability to cluster multiple separate structures on a property, ties to the smallness and tightness of these sort of cottage units. Oftentimes it's something we see people use this 1,200 square feet or less as the floor area of those units to keep them tight and small to a certain size. 1,200 square feet is still big enough that you can get a couple of bedrooms in them. They're great, they're great sort of first family homes. They're wonderful retirement spaces, but they can basically, by establishing sort of a maximum size of the units you can build, you can make sure that these smaller clustered lots are only occurring when the buildings are themselves also smaller. So it's sort of a suitable piece. And the second provision that becomes very, very important in these cottage neighborhoods is a design aesthetic and a layout, right? It's an idea of making sure that cottage communities, when they're really successful, have shared open space. And oftentimes the units are centralized around that. Sometimes parking is centralized away from the units, and there's walking paths to sort of connect. Landscaping, things like small front porches, all become very important to making sure you don't just end up with 4 walls and a roof very close together, but you end up with these very intentionally charming and well laid out little neighborhoods. So they're a great tool. More and more places are leaning into them. And I think it's something that you all could think about allowing in part of your planned unit development regulations.
Kayla,
Yeah.
can you kind of wrap this up and continue this next time?
Yeah.
Or
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to go very quick. One more thing we're thinking about is, looking into deeper that piece on allowing some of the recreationally zoned land to be used for workforce housing. We'll talk more about that next time. And the last sort of piece I've put forward here is something about just adjusting some of the setback requirements that I think are a little bit challenging when you're trying to build. And so that's sort of another small kind of like nuts and bolts area we're going to look at. So this will be sort of what we dig into more next time.
Thank you. That'll be great.
Neil, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Does anybody study the size of the workforce problem and the demographics of it?
Sorry, you know what? You were a little muffled. Could you repeat that for me?
Does anybody study the size of the workforce problem and the demographics?
Yes, you know, we have quite a bit. So we know we can basically we understand the number of people who are commuting in. We understand the number of people commuting out. We understand the average typical incomes that they're earning at their jobs in Waterville Valley. So we can sort of hone in on that. There's publicly available like countywide data, but we actually can dig into it a little bit closer specifically to your workforce. And I do have those numbers available. I'm happy to share them with you sort of in an email or something.
Thank you.
Billy, anything else? That's a question for Taylor, for those of the floor, anybody?
So John, I just want to make sure you saw Nancy's here.
Nancy, that's part?
No, she's just on. I wanted to make sure you saw that.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to see her.
Okay. Okay.
We'll do that.
Okay.
Taylor, great talk, and we do have to continue this to the front information there. So we have to move forward, plus we lost ours, and we'll get her next time.
Absolutely perfect. Thank you guys for your time this morning.
Thank you so much for your time. Okay, no other questions on this? So moving right along, we're gonna go right to.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm gonna use the chair as my needle.
Wow.
But I just wanted to start, thank you for having me. As you know, I'm from Tyrell Development Company, the landowner of most of the commercial land, undeveloped commercial land in the middle of town. Just as a refresher, some of you were here a little more than 3 years ago when I first came and talked about a conceptual plan we had developed for this land that we acquired in 2019. It was probably literally the month before COVID shut everything down. And but we talked about this is the conceptual plan we talked about then. It's been obviously 3 years since then. A lot has happened, both with our planning and the work with the resort that we do hand in hand with them. So just as a quick, I just wanted to start with a quick refresher for this because I think some of you probably weren't part of that discussion back then. Sorry if I can't remember exactly who was on the board back then. You know, we acquired this land in 2019 from Waterville Company, which had owned it since Tommy Corcoran had founded the resort. What we did was we wanted to focus on a master conceptual plan for how the central core of commercial land. This constitutes about 30 acres between the lot on the south side of the pond, the lot next to the ice arena, and the main lot where you have a lot of parking right now, and some open space. And so what we did was we wanted to develop a commercial, a master plan to share with and to work towards, and you know, work hand in hand with the town on some of the concepts behind that, because it will involve obviously a lot of cooperation with the town and everyone involved in building out the core of this town, which has been a long-term plan since how we founded the resort. There have been many iterations of master plans for the village core, and none of them have really come to fruition, and not much has been done since the build out of Town Square when that happened. So this plan envisioned a couple of hotels, one on the south side of the pond, one on the north side of the pond next to the ice arena, which is adjacent to the planned gondola terminal, which I think everyone's aware the resort has been working towards for quite some time. They include a little bit of residential, the Green Peak project that had been started back in around 2012, and included some mixed use and commercial space on this side of what surrounded what we call the Village Green.
James?
Yes.
Excuse me, can I interrupt you?
Sure.
Privilege of the floor, would you want to come around and take a look?
Yeah, you'd like to.
Oh, sorry about that.
It's very interesting, I don't want you to miss any of it, so
I'm going this way. Okay.
if you don't mind standing a little bit.
Nope.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
Thank you, Janet.
No, no problem at all. So, and this is, I think this has been, circulated a bit. We, so we've had a copy of this so people could see it around and, it's been out there as sort of the conceptual plan. Just briefly, not to go into the details of the aspect of this plan, but one of the constraints around this is, parking always becomes a factor. So when we did this initially, we said, look, let's just assume surface parking. And then we have to look at what the parking ratios required for, a hotel with several hundred rooms, another hotel here, some mixed use here, which includes some condominiums and some commercial space and additional commercial space. So we really said, what can we fit if we just assume surface parking? And this is about as dense as you can get, while still keeping some open space in the middle here. And so that's what we worked around, and this is kind of what we could fit that we thought met the needs of us as a landowner, resort as a resort operator who's looking to enhance the amenities and the attractiveness of the valley as a destination, the needs of the town in terms of the use of the land and things like that. So we worked off of this. We established this in early 2020. We were really looking at, trying to focus on hotel development as a core of this, because that's really important to the resort. Having more hotel beds in town is very important to the resort long term. As everyone knows, there's only a couple of true hotels in town. We have the Snowy Owl and the Silver Fox. The Snowy Owl and the Silver Fox, but there's not a lot of true hotels in town. And that's very important for those kinds of, for guests to have the opportunity to rent a true hotel. And there's a lot of guests who see that. As Tim can tell you much better than I. We have a lot of guests who can't find lodging in town. They're renting hotel rooms down in Thornton and Plymouth, and even though they're guests here in Waterville Valley. So that's something we wanted to add. COVID comes along, hotel industry, resort industry comes freezes, and so. As everyone knows, what we did was we looked to take advantage of look at the residential portion of this with the Green Peak townhouses, which we had planned on completing that project. And so we kind of pivoted and focused on that, and we got that part of the project underway. And so we've been with our construction partner, been building out those. We're very pleased with the project, but we took that opportunity once we got that underway to take another look at this master plan in both terms of anything that has changed sort of post-COVID or with the resorts master plan or anything like that. Look at, is anything we need to modify here? We've had talks with town staff before and, looking at, can we get more density here? And I know that's been a part of the conversation for a long time. Can we get more density? Can we fit in any other pieces of the puzzle that would benefit the town and the resort as a whole? And a lot of that comes down to, what can we do about parking? And so what we did was we went back to our planners and we worked with them and said, okay, now let's assume we have structured parking. It could be underground, it could be above ground. We have parking accommodations for Town Square and the Snowy Owl and the Black Bear that are all part of the land that we own here. All of those are flexible, and all of those envision a future where there may be structured parking. So we looked at that and said, if we go with structured parking, what does that do in terms of freeing up space? If we increase density, how dense can we go and still have something that is attractive and, not a crammed in, Manhattan City block, but, what can we do to fit more here? And so this is a revision of that plan that has come out of that. And
James, quick question. You guys own the Black Bear parking lots in?
yes,
Okay.
the Black Bear parking lots, the Town Square parking lots, those are all on the land that is part of that. It's kind of an 18-acre lot that stretches from the Black Bear parking lots over to in front of Town Square. And then across Village Road there, that the old golf course hole, that's about 8 acres. And then there's about 4 acres on the south side of that. And we've carved off 3 acres, 2 to 3 acres or so here for the Green Peak townhouses, but the rest of it is still our wonderful, very, very understanding neighbor. So as I said, we took another look at this and we said density. What can we do to maximize the value of this land as not just as a landowner, but as, working, we are part of the resort, we're the principal owner of the resort, as well as the company Tyrell that owns this land. I work very closely with Tim on all of these planning ideas. So what you see here is the completion of the Green Peak project, roughly as envisioned. And then you see the hotel on the south side of the pond, very much the same. That's always been, this has been a part of most of these master plans. The size of that lot, it makes it very amenable to that kind of development. We want to keep that wedding venue there and continue to utilize that. But what we did was, we have structured parking, we have a couple of parking garages here. And what you don't see here is there's actually underground parking underneath most of these large buildings as well. And so by doing that, it allows us to create more density in terms of the footprints of the buildings, but also allows us to make the buildings taller, because we can now add the parking that's needed to add another story or two to some of these buildings. So what you have here is buildings that range between 2 and 5 stories. You have, and I'll just walk through the elements of the plan. Why don't I do that? And folks can ask any questions if please interrupt me as you go along. So we have that boutique hotel that is still the same, probably a 75 to 80 room hotel. One of the things we've recently added to the idea here is conceptually talk about, we've been talking to the chapel group about whether that would be a location on that property where the chapel envisioned by the chapel group could go. So we've started to incorporate that thinking into maybe we could do something there in collaboration with them. And that's would be a win-win for both that as a venue for, obviously we're having weddings in the arbor there now, but we could have an indoor venue there for weddings as well, but also at the chapel that the community could utilize, for services and things like that. So we think that might be a win-win that we could add into our planning. We have that large hotel next to the gondola terminal. It's a little bit expanded from what we envisioned, probably about 325 rooms in this hotel. It has a wing that would have a conference center. And we would have conferences adjacent to the hotel and the gondola terminal. This is an area where there may be condominiums or a club or something like that adjacent to the gondola terminal that's here in the center of town. The green space is a little bit reduced, but we still have an open space here for public use and public events. We have a couple of mixed use buildings you would envision here. Over here, this building would be mixed use with residential on upper floor, much like Kayla was talking about, actually. Residential upper floors, commercial ground floor, where you could have retail, restaurants, cafes, anything like that. We have another building over here. We've removed those sort of smaller townhouse type residentials that were in the original plan and gone with a similar building as there. We have upper floors are residential. There's a wing over here dedicated to an adventure center. As everyone knows, we have the adventure center here in Town Square, the bike and cross country center, but we want to expand on the offerings that can do. We feel like if we move that over here, we can have a bigger footprint. We can have some indoor activities as well as some additional outdoor activities, perhaps a miniature golf course or something like that. Out here, this could all be integrated as an activity zone for what's going on with the resort. We have some additional commercial buildings here in the center that could be restaurants, cafes, aquatic, indoor, outdoor aquatic. We know we have the pool at the athletic club, but with increased density and increased visitation, folks staying right here, we think there'll be greater demand for amenities like that. We also have the idea of a restaurant here along the waterfront. One thing people might notice is in this vision building, what we call building R in Town Square is removed from this concept. That does a couple of things in that it opens up Town Square to be able to have larger activities within the square itself, but also by relocating the restaurant, mostly that building is the restaurants right now, but by relocating those to other locations, either here or in one of these buildings or in the hotel or any of these spaces, spread those out, spread the restaurant footprints out, but also it solves a thorny back of house service problem. As we know, that's not the greatest area as it is now, with the dumpsters and everything there at the back of that building to service those restaurants. With the gondola terminal coming in here, that becomes even more complicated and difficult. So our thought is to move those relocate those eating establishments to other locations. You spread that out, which is great for the guests, but also solves kind of allows you to sort of plan better for back of house service for wherever restaurants end up being in these plans. So as far as parking goes, we have garages here and here. We have some of these surface lots are maintained in these areas. Town square parking would probably be pushed out to be over here in part of this garage. Black Bear parking would continue to be here. Snowy Owl parking would be here. Spaces for the facilities themselves would be underground. This building here is envisioned as a commercial building. You could even, have a little parking area here. We actually envision something like the grocery store, which our town moving to a location like this to make it much easier for folks in town to pop in, pop out, get groceries and things like that. Obviously, that's convenient now, the way parking is at Town Square, but with parking pushed out, it becomes a lot less convenient for people to stop in, grab some groceries and stop back out. So something like that could happen.
Can I jump in?
Yes, please, Sam.
So a couple of things that I really like about the plan. I always think of the drive as you come into the main road and you look across the pond, you don't lose that. The bigger buildings offset to the back. So you don't lose that beautiful view that you have and the gondola of the motion of the gondola always coming in. As you come past that view, you're going to have a view of the athletic or the adventure area, which will excite the kids as they create the rival experience. So the rival experience is big. I really love how PHP did that. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that all of this parking isn't just haphazard. It was done with a study of how many rooms that we have.
Yes.
And did it to the planning board's recommendations and current board.
We looked at the number of hotel rooms between 300 and 325 here, 75 here. The number of condominium or residential units that could be in these buildings, which is depending on the sizes, could be 250 to 280 units. And looked at all those parking requirements as laid out in the zoning ordinance and added all of those up. And it comes out to just around that, give or take 1,900 parking spaces required for all of this. And so what you have is between all of the surface parking, between these garages and between the underground areas, with just about 1,900 parking spaces. So now some of these areas are shared, obviously, as they are now. The parking that exists now is shared between Snowy Owl and Town Square and Black Bear. And so coming up with the exact numbers that each of those locations has is a little bit of black magic involved in there. We're digging back through old planning board meetings about parking. The numbers are always a little bit different, but that would be part of any of these would be making sure we have adequate parking. And I forgot to point out one thing that's very important, certainly from your perspective as the town is, as with the original plan that we looked at a few years ago, this does envision that we cut off Village Road. And that some folks have heard of that concept before, some may not have. But what that does is, I think, really enhances all of this, because what happens is by cutting off Village Road, it makes it much easier to integrate the pieces of this. And what we have in here, you have a pedestrian only core that goes all the way around the pond, comes all the way up here and all the way around this village green, no vehicles. That is all pedestrian. Makes it very accessible, walkable, welcoming to all of the guests and residents who are in here enjoying all of the amenities and services and all the activity that's going on here. You have a seasonal ice rink here that would be ice in the winter with outdoor spaces around it. It would be covered with turf, big turf in the summer. It would be a event venue, performance venue, lots of those things. I don't know if anyone's been up to Stowe. The village they've built out at the base of Spruce Peak has a very similar amenity like this, and they have events all summer long where they have food tastings and festivals and music and things like that. So it's a very popular way, very flexible way to have a hub of activity right in the center here where things are always going on. So we basically have kind of an open space here. We have a hub of activity here. We still have the hub of activity with Town Square extending out to the beach. You know, we have the boats on this side of the pond, but we know they've been moved over there, but neither here nor there. And so you have all, and then you have another activity, hub of activity with the Adventure Center here. So you have these areas where there is activity. And I think that's one of our goals kind of as the resort operator is so that when guests come here, they feel like stuff is happening, stuff is going on. They want to get out there and they want to do things. They're not just staying in a condo or in their room and ordering room service. They're getting outside and doing things because there's a whole slew of things for them to do and a variety of things for them to do, all right outside the door. And they can just walk out their door and go here or here or here and enjoy what's going on. And with the gondola project, as part of this, you have then the tie-in between what's going on here in town and then what's going on in the mountain. Obviously, in the winter, people are gonna want to hop right on there with their skis from here. They can walk right over to here from any of these areas and hop on the gondola and head up to the mountain. In the summertime, it gives the opportunity to have more activities up on the mountain and have more activity. You'll have the leaf peepers in the fall. We think it would be a spectacular trip up the mountain in the fall for people who want to view foliage. So all of that will create what we think is a much more vibrant and active core right in the middle of town, which we think will benefit.
Is there enough parking for the ice arena?
Yep, we've incorporated all of that.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, between this garage and these service lots, it should be adequate.
I think it's important to understand some of the history that we've gone through on this too. Tom Corcoran and his group, they worked the entire town as concentric circles. So the core of the town always was designed to be the most active and the most density. When SE Group did the pedestrian study with WCI, doing the master plan at that time, you could see how they tried to bring some of that into that original plan from back, I believe it was 2013 or somewhere around there. Then the next transition, we're really trying to look at how we could do this with surface parking. We just weren't happy with the densities that we were seeing. And we heard that from the public when our responses started to come back. And so that was kind of leading into this. We did get VHB involved, primarily due to the fact that they had the experience with Stowe. And Stowe turned out to be a wonderful community, and it's a great place to go visit. If you get up there, it's nice how they made these intimate spaces and not such big spaces. And that intimate spaces creates a little bit more of a feeling of things happening around. And then also the gondola provides that movement, a constant movement. So it feels like something's happening, there's something going on. So I just want to make sure we added that to the history. We took all that into account. We still take that into account when we're putting these ideas on paper.
Sure. Can you talk about these garages? and
Yes.
Describe how many stories, what they would look like?
Um,
Materials?
The way they are scoped here to provide the right amount of parking is they go down one level. So there's one underground level, then there's a surface level and one up. So there are 3 levels total.
So there's 2 levels above.
No, I think 1 level above grade. So there's underground, grade, and above grade.
So it's like 15, 18 feet above ground.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So my name's Paul Sonia.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, I live at residential.
Okay.
I'm not gonna stare.
No, that's okay.
Two-star garage outside my door.
Well, I will say it's always been part of the parking agreements between all of these venues in the town. That structured parking was a definite possibility for what would be built in the village core. It's been that pre-exists our ownership of the resort. That goes back to the 90s when the original parking agreements are laid out between Town Square, the Snowy Owl, the town with regards to the ice arena was that structured parking was envisioned as part of.
But a lot of the bylaws indicate a lot of the spaces would be below grade, below ground, not 2 stories tall.
Well, I mean, structured parking, both below ground and above ground was envisioned as a future possibility for. That goes back to the 90s when some of this existing development was done. And the agreements between the Waterville Company and the resort and the town regarding the ice arena, town square, the trails, the shared parking, that's been a possibility since.
Right, so your impact as some of these surrounding neighborhoods is not real positive with that parking garage installed. And there is nothing in those bylaws that describe what those garages look like. Say that they're 20 feet high or 18 feet high. You gotta take some care to the people who are already there. You have to take some care into the structures around there and integrating them. And putting that garage is a detriment to some of the people who've been there for 20+ years.
I mean, we'll take that into consideration, but as I said, garages in the commercial core have always been a possibility.
That doesn't make it right. Sure, that it's always been a possibility, but things change, your plans have changed. Sure. Just because it was possible from years ago, doesn't mean it's right for the village, you know.
Okay.
Well, that's what we're here to hear responses as well.
This is conceptual. We're not submitting this as a plan. This is a conceptual.
We have had conversations of going subterranean, and there is a lot of constraints. Primarily the number of parking that we have to do to get density. And it's, if we want to have density, we're gonna have to figure out parking. That's a critical factor of this.
Have you figured out?
Just do it in a very sensitive way to the people who have been
Of
here
course.
for 25+
Of
years,
course.
right? And so if you take a look at this building here, how tall is this building?
4 to 5 stories.
4 to 5 stories,
Yes.
so you're talking 75 feet, 60 to 70 feet,
60,
60 to 70.
60 plus, yeah,
We're talking Golden Eagle.
Yes,
yes.
or higher. Yeah, maybe so.
It's Golden Eagle.
That's pretty high.
Whatever the ladder truck can reach. Higher.
Mhm.
Do you have like phases or a timeline of what you?
We do not have a specific timeline. I mean, it would happen in phases. If you could probably be thought about it in, this is not to put these in order, but obviously this is a little bit of a discrete project. This project is kind of one large project. We sort of have this side on one side of the gondola, this on the other side of the gondola, and this over here. So there's sort of 4 almost discrete elements. The timing and order of those, I couldn't say. We're working with a couple of possible development partners to on the hotel projects in particular. Some of this is going to coincide with the timing of when the gondola is constructed as well. So we're trying to, we don't have a timeline there for yet. We're working on the permitting of that with the Forest Service. So we're trying to dovetail a little bit of this. So the exact planning and engineering of the gondola terminal can dovetail well with the other planning. Yeah.
Speaking of the gondola, where are people gonna park to come in for the day?
Up at the mountain.
So the gondola is only gonna be servicing people that stay on the valley floor.
Correct.
Yes. In our
How are you gonna make that happen?
shuttle buses.
Well, then.
We want to increase the frequency of shuttle activity to take people from anywhere in town and bring them to one of these 2 drop-off points at either end of the.
The
This
vast
area.
majority of people that come to see the mountain are day trips. Am I right or not?
Yeah, of
Yeah.
courst.
Okay, so.
I wouldn't say the vast
a day-
majority. We're about, if you look at the number of people that are coming up the mountain, it's probably 2/3 that come in on cars. That are are day trippers, but a lot of those day trippers have places in the valley. You know, a lot of the BBTS people, a lot of the skiers that come in are either Campton, Thornton, Waterville coming in for the day, that are still destination resort, weekend warrior type guests. What we really need to do for the town and community is develop it into a destination, a true destination that's going to bring the leisure guests in. Leisure guests is what populates the restaurants, populates the ski resort, has a higher yield.
And they're gonna wanna park at Town Square.
Oh, yeah, because they're gonna be staying there.
They're gonna be driving in from Boston.
I would say that probably not. If you're a skier, you are gonna want to be near the ski resort. You're gonna want to be, and with the development plan that we have at the mountain, we have a skiing parking that's gonna be right next to the parking lot. They'll make the skiing, a big downfall of our parking is obviously having to walk up the hill. That's the big downfall. So the ski by trails that we've done during COVID really showed that people use those. Awesome. So the ski down trail to the mid station of the gondola, it's going to make it much more accessible to want to park up at the ski resort. Also, if you go to other resorts,
Sorry, where's the mid?
mid station is down by the Triple I split off. So access road, Route 49, Triple I, the mid station's down there. And if you'd like to familiarize yourself with that planning, it's with that master plan, it's on the White Mountain National Forest website. It's a public document. But the big thing about any resort community that's built this way,
You got permission to ski down to there, right now?
to ski down to that, no, that's what we're working through the permitting for. That's the.
That mid station would be part of the gondola permit. So the gondola would go up to the mid station up here near where Triple I Road splits. And then it will be an angle station, and from there it will turn and go up to the top of Green Peak, near where the Green Peak lift currently lands. So you now have the gondola coming up one side of Green Peak and the triple chair coming up the other side of Green Peak.
So we need a permit area extension for that, and we are working with the National Forest on the project proposal letter at this time. And then we will move into the environmental assessment period.
We would not build anything until the gondola is approved.
It's the cornerstone of the project, yes, sir.
So is the answer yes?
I would say no, because there's like the pods you explained earlier.
Yeah, no, I mean, the design and execution of this is, highly dependent on the gondola. But for example, this is not. This is kind of a discrete project that could be undertaken anytime.
This probably won't be either.
So there's aspects of it that could happen sooner than when the gondola goes in, and aspects that would probably more than likely happen after.
But I'd like to go back to addressing the question, sir. I'd like to go back to, can I go back to your original question about talking about the parking, so we can bring it back? So the parking structures at major resorts like this that have this, they have gated entrance. So if you're going in for your check-in at your hotel, or if you have a condo in this area, you have a key card, the key card opens the gate and allows you into that parking structure. That's how you prevent the convenience parking issue. So I just want to make sure we circle back to that question. Go ahead.
I don't want to prevent it. I'm thinking you're gonna have a problem without having public parking
Oh, we have lots of public parking in the plan.
down here.
No. We don't have a lot of public parking in this area. And once again, it becomes part of the problems that we have as a community with trying to provide the amount of parking that we need for all of the hotels. So to provide it to the level that we need it, we're gonna need this parking to be provided for these different entities. Not that, I gotta back up a little bit, because part of that parking is also determined by the restaurants. So there would need to be public parking for the restaurants also.
So, yeah, not all of this would be, restricted parking and, part of, yes, we need to make sure. Figure out a way to make sure that day trippers are still heading up to the mountain, to the parking areas there, making the parking at the mountain convenient enough so that a day tripper is not gonna wanna come to the village, park, lug all of his stuff to the gondola terminal, then ride the gondola terminal up and then get on the mountain, as opposed to, I can go park at the mountain and get right on the mountain.
But first of all, you're only dealing with one season, talking about winter and ski. This is a 4-season resort. People come in, they want to play golf, they want to do all sorts of stuff, and there's no parking.
Yeah, oh, there's a lot of parking.
It's all restricted to people that stay in the hotels.
No, it's not, that we've taken
That's
into
what I backtracked
consideration
on.
the shared parking that's required for things like Town Square, the ice arena, for commercial space. All of those went into the calculation.
Show me where that parking is.
It's not all designated, there's surface spaces here, There's surface spaces here and here and here. There's more than enough spaces for what's needed for the snowy owl and the black bear over here, for example, in surface. And so it's much like it is now. There's lots of parking spread around for all of the things that go on in the center of town, but it's not all reserved to specific locations.
People don't park in the Black Bear to go to Town Square, am I right?
Not right now, they don't, no.
So you're gonna make them park,
Well,
and because you own it, where the Black Bear people don't park.
There's no parking there.
Right, but it can't be used for both the Black Bear people and people that come in.
I guess
A
I'm
lot of the
confused by
parking is-
question.
A lot of the parking is multi-use. There is no designated parking spaces in our current plan. Those
also-
parking lots in the center of town are for all of the businesses around. They were calculated, the number of them was calculated to take everybody into consideration. But yes, somebody can park in the Black Bear parking lot and use Town Square Lane. The way it is right
I'm
now.
not saying they're not allowed to. What I'm saying is you're taking away those parking lots that people use today to go to Town Square.
And the calculation will have to be done and they'll have to be replaced.
But he just said you're gonna need a key to get into the parking lots.
Into the parking
structure.
that are identified for the resort, that are identified for the hotels. Just like any major, if you go to Beaver Creek, Colorado, you're gonna run into this exact same plan. If you run into Breckenridge, any major ski resort anywhere in the nation that has this type of a structure, you're gonna run into structured parking, you're gonna run into the convenience parking that's gonna have timestamps on it, you're gonna run into different ways that they control their parking, which will all be integrated into the plan.
What I'm saying, I understand what you're saying. I've been to these places as well as probably everybody else. There's not enough public park.
We haven't
Well, we
identified
don't know.
exactly
We haven't-
which one would be.
They haven't
Parking
submitted a
lot.
plan.
Correct.
Well,
They're gonna have to show us how it is sufficient.
Correct.
That's part of your review as the planning board, is to talk about what they propose in the plan.
I mean, okay, so let me just be the devil's advocate. You're talking about an ice skating rink in the winter that you're gonna use for entertainment venue in the summer. Where are those people gonna park when they drive in?
Well, ideally to the, well, you're talking about coming in from Canton and Thornton. If they're coming in from Camden and Thornton, those would be in the structured units. That'd be for the businesses that we're trying to provide. That's exactly what the parking, the zoning board has decided the parking rules are and how we determine how many parking spots per business, per seat at the restaurant and so on and so forth. All of that would have to be calculated into the final plans that would be submitted.
So Tim, if I'm going in, obviously, but if somebody is coming in from Campton or Thornton for something that's gonna happen at that venue, and they're gonna have dinner at one of the restaurants, what you're saying is that there's gonna be a voucher or something that the restaurant is gonna do, just like.
There's a lot of ways you can.
I think
do
that's
parking,
an
right? There's
option,
a-
right? There's a million
Yeah,
options.
yeah.
But like, so say you wanna go to the post office, where would you park? I think that's concerned for all the town.
Well, that's what. that's what
Where
we
is
were-
the post office?
That's one of the things we were thinking about for D building,
Is there?
you know, because obviously, as James expressed earlier, that you have this. We have the parking here and here now that you just run into the post office. We want to make that more convenient, obviously, for the residents and for the homeowners, because you're not gonna want to have to, trudge all the way into town with your groceries coming back out. So that's one of the reasons we started to look at that D building. And got serious.
So those types of businesses that are in, like, now, the pop in, pop out type things, that are especially for residents and things, as opposed to, guests who might be doing some retail shopping, and go shopping in Town Square, you can put those out here, you have this parking lot here, maybe a metered parking lot for quick, 1 hour limit, half an hour limit, or, you go to a place like Portsmouth, there's 15-minute spots all over the city for you to reserve people who need to jump in and jump out of a place like the post office, and do that mixed in with the longer term parking areas as well.
Jim,
Yes.
James, the gondola, is that coming out of the hotel or is it a separate?
It's a completely separate terminal, actually, it's not clear here, but actually this envisions, it actually would be up one level from ground level. It would be raised, so you would go up these stairs onto a raised plaza, and then you would walk into the gondola. That allows us to make use of the space under there as well, so it becomes a two-level space. And also it kind of gets you, the gondola itself up a little bit higher, which is, helps us make use this space under here not be so restricted, because if the gondola is up high as it's coming out of the building, you're not worried about being skimming along the ground as you raise up, so you get a little bit more flexibility there.
So it wouldn't be a private.
No, this is a big open plaza here that opens up now with the removal of that R building. It opens up that whole plaza like right down into town square, so you have a big open space flowing down there towards the pond.
So town square kind of stays as it.
Well, you have this building is removed, so you're opening up this space here, and you can do a little bit more there. Obviously, we do some, events and activities there, but it's.
Where's the
basically
present Pacer Arena?
Still there.
That's there, okay. I thought that.
That's owned by the town and leased by the hockey academy, so that's not our, part of our planning purview.
I thought the jump on that building you said would be in a restaurant.
This is envisioned as maybe a restaurant overlooking the pond out here. You have that area that bulges out from the, where the X arena is, that bulges out onto the pond there. We do have the ability to build, the one structure, up to the edge of the pond, and actually could have a deck reaching out over the pond. That's part of the
Is that?
pond easements and agreements that were developed between the Waterville Company and the towns.
Second, quick cross-country trail that comes through there.
So, yeah, there would be, the trails would continue here through here. We hope to put a bridge over the creek here, so folks don't have to walk up to the road, and that would complete this loop around the pond. We are, there's a trail easement that exists all the way around the pond to keep this trail around the pond within 100 feet of the pond. So that's obviously a great amenity for folks who envision a nice, perhaps even, lighted 2-foot path. You have those little bollard lights that could light up that, so people can, in the evenings, walk around, do a complete loop around the pond there, and then it continues out as is, through the culvert here out to the trail network.
Is this whole vision like a 10-year plan?
That would be awesome.
That would be great.
Okay, good.
Yes.
We want to hear that.
It's, yes. 10 years is a good,
Stomach.
throwing a dart at a target to come up with how long,
Yeah.
10 years is good a guess. There's a lot here, obviously. This is a lot of development. This is a lot of work. This is a lot of planning. And so it takes a lot of time. Yes, it's a lot of investment. So it's certainly not something that's going to happen all at once, for sure.
And the main part here is, James is here showing, we want the community, we want you guys to be involved and start talking about this, because the way this happens is we all get actively involved and support these types of things. Without the support of the community, without the support of everybody in the room, nothing like this is ever going to happen. Developers aren't going to want to come in here and come with us. This is the stuff that makes developers want to come in. So if we show friendly faces, we start making these plans, making them make sense better for us with this impact that we're getting today. That's really going to affect the viability and the length it takes to build this thing.
And I wanted to ask, privilege of the floor, anybody in privilege of the floor? Thank you. Go ahead.
I would like you to show these new buildings that you're putting up, the height of them. Whether right now we're seeing a flat plan.
We're working on a 3D version of this that would show massing and scale
I
and
think
things like
it would
that.
be very important to see
That's
that.
the next step of
Okay.
this planning process is to do that, work on some of those 3D things, because we also want folks to see, what the gondola is gonna be like, and so that's certainly
Okay.
part of our next step.
Can we get a copy of this drawing?
I think so.
Public now, so
Would you put it on the website?
it's on the front.
It was on the web, right?
The original was,
Yeah,
this one,
not
this
this one.
is the first time anyone outside of us has seen this, so.
Yeah, it'd be nice for people in town to
Yeah,
see
yeah,
it.
we certainly expected that.
We have black there.
Yeah.
Yeah, currently, Presidential and Black Bear are responsible for Black Bear Road. being private road.
Yes.
And that looks like there'll be a lot more traffic that'll increase our liability. As well as increase our cost for maintenance.
Yeah.
What is your proposal to mitigate that for us?
Well, we would certainly work with everyone to work out, maintenance agreements for whose benefit are these parking spaces and, if we're adding a lot more parking in that's not specific to, for example, the Black Bear, obviously we're not gonna expect the Black Bear to be maintained. So we would, sit down and work out those agreements with the various impacted entities, the Snowy Owl in the same boat we provide parking for the Snowy Owl now. So we would, work on that as specific portions of this plan, went from conceptual to proposal, we would want to sit down with folks and work out all of that. So I can't say for sure right now, but obviously we're not expecting, we certainly understand the parking agreement as it stands now. If we're looking to modify that, we're gonna have to sit down with you and come to an agreement with that, obviously.
Can the town make copies of those? Do we have the capacity to print it?
Yeah, if James is okay with it. I mean, that's,
I mean, I was wondering whether or not if you give them
we do have,
or
I can scan it into our
I can.
thing, or you can send it digital or however.
Really nice. That'd be really nice if you could, if you don't have a problem. saying
Yeah,
that.
something we can PDF and email.
Yep, I can.
Right to the owners.
Right.
Sure.
That's-
No, I can provide the electronic copy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be nice, I mean, it's beautifully done, you guys did a great job, but it'd be really nice to be able to.
No, that's what happened with when we
No,
went over
we
the
did.
original, once we presented it, it's out there in the public and, I know folks are gonna wanna look at it, and so, like someone said, it was in the, we had it in the wig rag, I talked to Mike about it, and he wrote about it in the wig rag, and we're obviously, we want people to see it and understand what we're thinking about in terms of this development. Like I said, this is conceptual, this isn't a specific plan. We're gonna come back next month and drop a planning board, a site plan with you on aspects of this, but this is the basis of where we're thinking right now in terms of both the development of this land and with the resort and the gondola and all of that stuff, so.
Based on what you're saying, is it true that you're gonna maintain all the parking lots as far as snow removal and things like that?
We would work that out with, everyone who takes advantage of the parking with the Snowy Owl, Black Bear, Town Square, the hotels, the residential stuff, that would all be part of the specific, agreements that went into place as each of these phases were done.
It sounds like you self-feel, you own all this.
No.
Well,
What I'm trying to.
we own the land, but we're not necessarily gonna own the hotel. I mean, this is
I just want you to say whether the town is gonna be responsible for any of it.
well, I don't think the town is responsible for any of it now, so I don't see why that would change. I mean. No, this is all private land, yeah, no, and as we just mentioned about the Black Bear, we have an existing parking area with the Black Bear, with Town Square, with Snowy Owl. We're gonna be altering those, we're gonna have to work out something that everyone is agreeable to in terms of who's bearing the cost for maintenance and things like that, so.
I'm just wondering what's not the thing.
Never imagined it was.
And also you have, you might have a lot of room for businesses. Can you explain that a little bit more for, instead of residents?
Well, we envision mixed, back to what Taylor was saying, she talked about that, the ground floor commercial, upper floor residential. That's exactly what we're envisioning with some of these buildings. And then you could even have some, obviously a hotel that size, you're gonna have a restaurant and a cafe and things like that. So not exclusively reserved to the hotel's guests to use to make use of those, and some retail in there, I'm sure probably. And you have these other buildings here that could be, they're not designated, you see the aquatic here, but this building could have a number of things in it. You could have a cafe here, you could have, whatever you can imagine, your other retail here in these types of buildings. We're not specifying what types of businesses would be in here. We just envision you're gonna wanna have some commercial buildings there that are offering, some sort of retail or commercial services to guests and residents.
That'd be fabulous to bring in younger people. Exactly, to support the school. Yeah, well, and just, regular working folk who not necessarily have kids. like, they don't need a giant home, they don't need a condo, they need like an apartment on their own.
Yeah.
Right, or a small home that they can afford.
Yeah.
That's such a change. I mean, I've lived here full time for 30 years. This is such a change. And you have to think about a lot of the older people, granted, I'm older. No telling when my way is out, but you know, you've got to consider the people that live here in this community.
Yeah.
What's gonna happen to that gondola when it's off season? Do you plan on having things going on at the mountain?
Absolutely.
Like mountain biking slides,
I-
etc.
Yeah, not slides. So we are on the White Mountain National Forest. So things that we do on the mountain have to reflect the vision of the forest supervisor. So Derek at the time, we work with the forest and we come up with the visions for that. It'll be more natural. We are New Hampshire's family resort. Our gating factor for all of those types of projects is, can grandma and grandpa do it with their grandkids? That's our gating factor. That's what we're trying to develop, things that we can look at. So the miniature golf type thing that we talked about earlier, those types of activities would happen down in the core. Those are things we can't bring up on the national forest. The things we can bring up on the national forest are like the tree walk lines. No, we don't want, so the zip line, is zip line attractive to grandma and grandpa and, you know,
I've done it.
it might be for some, right? But we do see other mountains doing the same. So we're looking at those different activities. Actually, I went to Europe this past year, and Lux had this really great walkway that was elevated on the treetops, and you walked around on the treetops, and they had this giant slide for the kids, and it really was amenable for the entire family. So those types of activities that we're looking at to try to bring those activities in. We're not looking to build, you know, the crazy adrenaline rush, but we do want mountain biking. We do want to have maybe some initiatives courses. We're not going to set records with the longest or fastest zip line in the world. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it amenable for everyone to come up here and enjoy the wonderful area we have.
The gondola itself is a huge summer amenity. I mean, you go to places like Moon and Stowe, they run their gondolas, you know, all through the summer, and a lot of folks for whom hiking up a mountain isn't really in the cards, whether they're older or not fit for it, or they, you know, really tiny kids, they love the opportunity to take the gondola ride up to the top of the mountain, see the views, walk around a little bit, you know, maybe have lunch up there, things like that. So in and of itself, the gondola is a summer amenity.
So just to explain where the gondola starts in Town Square, the reason it's important to have it in the center, concentric circles, that's the hub, that's where all the distribution of the people will go. I always talk about, when we talk about the day skier and how the day skier interacts with this, we want them to come down to the town. We want them to populate our businesses in town, so we have a vibrant downtown. So I always think that my day when I win is when I see someone walking out with pizza and a ski boot. Like, that's going to be a really good day, because that means they're coming down and they're populating our towns. Then when we go into the mid station, we view that as being more of a leisure guest amenity. Right now, we have a very good resort for the athletic visitor, the day visitor, as we expressed. We need more leisure guests. We need those leisure guests that fill the hotels, that want to have that pace of life. So the current resort will stay very much the way it is, but this area will be more of the beginner area, rental shops, your ski school, the amenities that these leisure guests need first. And then you go up from there to the top of the mountain. That's where we have that top of the mountain area for the restaurants and the views and all of that. You go to the top of Green Peak and you've got 360-degree view of these 4,000-foot peaks. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's one of the most unique views that is in New England. That's the reason why we believe this gondola will be successful and run 10, 11 months out of the year. Obviously, we'll have to shut it down in a period of time to do maintenance on it every year, just like any other public transit. And we'll work with how we do that. Currently, we're working on that with the bunch of six. So that's our vision for the gondola.
Well, based on the increased traffic, you vision additional skiable acres.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
The Green Peak, so the first proposal, because we're not proposing to increase our snow capacity, and that's our gating factor right now. So we can only make snow on a small acreage at this point. So the first proposal only had a few trails coming down from the side of the house, so making that to be able to get in and out, really taking care of our parking issues that we have at the moment, trying to make parking more accessible. And also creating that corridor from the town into the ski resort. From there, we can work our way across, developing the trails across that area. And in that master development plan, it brings trails all the way around here and keep the basin.
Almost there.
James and Tim, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I had a question about ADA. I feel like our brand is that we're not just ADA compliant, we're ADA friendly. And so I was wondering if you had addressed that when you were discussing the plan. My reception's been cutting in and out.
I would say not specifically in this, but I think if specific components were actually designed and planned, that would obviously be part of the process. Most things these days incorporate, as far as I know, everything pretty much incorporates that. For example, the bridge here, we certainly thought about it in terms of looking at possibilities for putting a bridge here across the brook to complete that loop around the pond. And, you work with all the bridge companies and they make sure everything is sloped, and wide enough to be ADA accessible so that trail could be a very accessible trail all the way around the pond. So to that extent, yes. And then obviously when specific things are designed, it's going to be part of the consideration.
Yeah, I guess I would encourage you to put some thought into being actually ADA friendly, not just compliant, and kind of go the extra mile.
Absolutely. Obviously, we work with the adaptive. We work with adaptive currently at the mountain, and we try to find ways to make that better. You guys can see me out on a snowmobile a lot of times trying to take people up because we know that's a problem. We put the elevator in, not the best elevator apparently, but it's in, and we're continuing to work on that. The new Tecumseh 6, one of the big things that we looked at when we were doing that, one of the early discussions that we had even before we purchased the lift was how does it make ADA accessibility, and it went beyond our expectations. We worked with the adaptive. We're very familiar that we not only want to be compliant, we want to go over and beyond. We definitely want to make sure that all of our facilities here forth are not just compliant, but very amenable. We've been trying to do that with everything we've been doing throughout the resort.
Thank you.
Tim, I have a quick question. It's sort of what signed off. But I'll ask it publicly. Snowmaking. Can you only make snow during a certain period of time of year, or how does that work?
Yeah, when it's freezing. No, with the National Forest. So there is no regulation of exactly when and how we can make snow on the National Forest. We do have water right regulations. We have to keep the Mad River at a certain level as it passes by our pump house. So we don't necessarily have a certain number of gallons per minute that we can pump up. We can pump as much as we want as long as we don't take it below minimum stream levels. So we monitor that. We have a monitor that's in our wet well that monitors exactly what the stream level is, and then we can gauge how much we can take out at that time. As we always see towards the August, September time frame, when the trees are soaking up all the water still because they have their leaves on, and we're in a dry period, the river goes way down. I've seen it below minimum stream when we're not pulling. That always makes me nervous. But then every year, as soon as the leaves fall off, the river comes right back up, and I've never seen it below minimum stream.
And the resort's master development plan envisions future snowmaking pond to increase that capacity, which is part of that future Green Peak expansion, adding those additional trails with that additional capacity from the pond, that will allow us to expand what we can cover.
Correct.
Could you put a copy of that? Ellen had a good thing, at the post office, that's the meeting place in Waterville Valley. It would be nice.
This or the
That.
Okay.
A copy of it, just so that people can visually see.
Sure, absolutely.
Can you comment on any timelines for any of these new structures? Do you feel the big hotel will most likely happen next, or?
I think if I had to pick something that's most likely to happen next, it would be the smaller hotel here, because that's sort of a self-contained standalone type of thing. It doesn't hinge as much upon the final approval of the gondola, for example. Not that this hotel totally depends on the gondola, but obviously it's very integrated. This stuff over here is very integrated into that gondola. So we want to make sure we have our ducks in a row on that before doing anything final here. So you know, that is, if I had to pick something that would be the next thing to drop, it would be something, it would probably be that. But again,
Yeah, can you give any estimations on maybe some of this development? This,
I mean, sometime in the next 10 years, I really don't have a timeline on it.
just curious. I know it's a tough question.
Yeah, it's a tough, so it's just a very difficult question, and I don't want to create expectations that don't pan out.
The only the things that we know are like, how long do it take to permit the gondola? Once we hit the start date.
Yeah.
Then it depends on the environmental assessment we have to do, and those at a minimum are 12 months.
Yeah.
At a maximum of 36. So between 12 and 36 months, we should be able to work through the permitting of the gondola. Once we get to the start line, we're not at the start line yet.
Yeah.
So just in that gating factor, just to get the permit to put the gondola in, we're a year to 3 years away. Okay. To just start even thinking about putting the gondola, then we have to go into, we'll go into engineering prior to that. We'll start getting, because we have to get that done for the environmental assessment, just where towers would be, that type of thing. But then once we get permit, then we can go into final engineering, where they do all the load calculations. We have to go in front of the state tramway board. The state tramway board then has to approve all of that. That can take 6 months to 9 months to work through that process. And then, of course, manufacturing has to start happening. Manufacturing goes into the next winter. Traditionally, they build it over the winter, and then the construction can begin in the spring of that year. So you're talking 2 to 3 years minimum. Okay.
And it's an industry where,
it's happening,
you know,
years.
No, gondola you can do it. And even that large of a gondola, because basically what this gondola is two separate lifts. So if the construction period of that, it may be that we do the upper section the first summer and the lower section the second summer, the lower section the first summer, and the upper section. Or it might be that we put the whole thing in.
2 construction seasons probably.
Yeah. However, I will say, you look at places like Sugar Bush, they did 7 of those lifts in 1 season. Okay, so it depends on where the contractors are. And that's what we're doing, James. That's what we're doing, James. But right now, the industry, you can't even order a lift right now. I can't order a lift next summer. It's 2 summers out right now. Because
They're already into 2025 if you want to.
and that's only gonna get worse because of the infrastructure age inside of our industry.
Okay.
Just like fire trucks.
Takes 3 years to get a fire.
You add that all up.
Mhm.
In my time of applying. This is a minimum of 5 years on.
I'd be, yeah, right, I'd be more 4 to 5 years, yeah. Okay. So actually putting passengers on the gondola.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, that's,
Five's a good.
It could not.
Good number.
It's exceedingly unlikely it could happen in less than 4. I mean,
Yes.
4 is the bare minimum. It could probably happen given the permitting, ordering,
Okay.
all of that, manufacturing, construction. So you're looking at.
and that's
4
kind of
plus.
Yeah,
for everything other than.
it's really,
Yes,
yes,
for a lot of this, it is. I mean, for a good portion of this, it is.
And we're trying to pay attention to the SE group, you know, the evaluation they did for the pedestrian study, what was that, 14, 15, somewhere around there? That was done. We're trying to pay attention to that and try to integrate that into these thoughts, you know, reducing the amount of bus traffic that we're using. Buses, we were the first resort to do buses in America. It's pretty cool. Like, but that's old. We need to come of age. We need to slow down on bus traffic, to increase pedestrian ways, we need to make sure that people can move about this town without having to happen, and make it very friendly. I did a tour with the US ski team last week, and I said, let's go over to the conference center. I was walking towards my truck and said, can't we just walk there? I didn't even think about it. It's just across the river. How do we encourage that? How do we make that better? I think that this plan does address some of those concerns, but obviously we can make it better.
No one has said a word about financing. So put that into the formula. There, and the changes that have occurred in the rate structures over the last year. That's
a huge part of this. I mean,
Yes.
right,
So,
this is well into
5
9
years,
figures
yes,
of,
I
this is
think-
well into 9 figures of development costs. So it is that's why we're looking at timescales of, a decade. So because you can't do all of that, it's just not possible to do all of it.
Yes.
but not impossible. Not impossible to do it, not all at once, but not impossible to do it.
Yes,
There's funding
you know,
mechanisms
that's why
to
it's
do it.
encouraging, it's not a discouraging statement, it's just that it's another fact that fits into this.
Oh, absolutely.
Nobody said anything about yet.
We run
I don't
financial
encourage it.
performance inside of the resort. We run for financial performance and we're on track with our 10-year plan with our financial performance. Everything seems to be tracking the way that the guy who does a lot of our financial work for us. A lot of what he predicted, and he is the godfather of all finances in our industry. He's done this forever. He's been pretty accurate. Yeah, that's on side of it. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, Mark, does this fit within our wastewater treatment plans?
Yes. All of these conceptual numbers that are generated by the rooms and everything were used by our engineering firm in the design. So,
And we add to the tax basis.
and well, and that's not an insignificant thing, because as a community, right, we've got what we have right now. This center of town is really the last meaningful land for development. So you do have to look out 20, 30 years or more and think about, without this type of tax base, with the commercial development that it brings, how do you afford the town in the next 30 years or so with just the residential development that we have? Because the commercial side is, other than the ski area itself, is pretty small. So this is critical, I think, to the long-term viability of the community.
What I find encouraging is that we've not said anything about building another Moon Mountain. With your marketing concept.
It already exists.
Right.
They can go
Absolutely right, and it may not be what Waterville Valley wants.
It is not.
It is not.
And that's,
I'll say it then, it is not. We don't want another room.
and that's why I live and breathe and eat in this community.
The rest of us.
I'm
the same
trying
way.
to understand this and trying to understand what works best for Waterville Valley, and certain things have worked really well, certain things haven't. And I'm dedicated to trying to make it work best and make Waterville Valley the best, New England resort that we can.
That is one of the unique things we have is you live.
So really, yeah. And
So
of
we
course,
can
having a
complain
chance
to
listen
him all.
helps.
Accurate complaints made.
He pays more attention to Katie than I do. It's okay.
Any more questions on this? Anything else? So it's gonna be a continued.
Of course, yes.
Thing, so we'll have you in again, I hope.
Yep. And as things evolve, we'll certainly keep updated on our concepts as things come to actual fruition. We'll obviously be back in front of the planning board for any specific projects that go ahead. And
Hopefully it won't take 3 years.
no. Yeah. No, sure, go ahead. Yeah, I'll just put it on the side here.
Well, you have that somewhere on a computer, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna send an electronic version that.
Just an electronic version so we can all.
I'll send it over to Mark and you guys can circulate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Good presentation.
No.
Good bearing. Wow.
That was important back, no?
The building
Yeah.
Well, they can see it, they will get that, otherwise, none of that.
Sure, who wants to build a hotel if there's no gondola?
Because, you know, when you look at this area. It's all dependent on the dump.
Yeah. Can you change it, may have a commercial tax rate in town?
No. Single tax rate. State law.
State law.
They have-
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
a single tax rate. Every taxpayer in a community has to pay on the same
Same
rate.
rate. Yeah, that's state law.
The differences are on property values. Commercial properties are valued differently than residential. properties.
Have flexibility.
So that's where the differentiation comes.
Oh.
So the price, so the zoning map is sets out the zones, and then the zones have values attached to them. And they only, in general terms, they're comparing commercial sales to the commercial property values, right? And they're using residential sales to establish the residential. So if you look in our assessing records, we have different neighborhoods. And those neighborhoods have different values for an acre of land.
Moving right along, Richard Ross will next, but Mark, just a really brief update on the road.
So they are boxing out, they've removed all of the pavement from Village Road. All the way to Valley Road, right up Snows Brook Road and Tecumseh. They are boxing out there. Almost to the Silver Fox Inn now with the box out. Going along very well. I think that by middle of next week, the box out will be complete. And we will have fine grading. Yeah.
Okay.
We will have fine grading happening, and their plan is to have a base course of pavement on the area that's dirt right now by the week of the 24th, so before the end of the month. We should have a base course on that, and then they'll go on the other side of Village Road, and they'll start reclaiming that end. Once they're gonna do the same thing, right? They'll reclaim. There's not as much boxing out involved there by Mad River condos and Osceola Road and all that around the corner. So that should go pretty quickly. Middle to third week of August, perhaps. We'll get another base coat down on that. And then they'll start on Valley.
Any questions on that? The work groups, just want to establish that they're going okay, that the meeting and that kind of stuff. We don't really need to get into.
Can I ask a question on Mark? I'm getting. I don't know, well, the question becomes the current Blackbeard parking lot lighting. Who owns those lights? Is it the town? Say something. Is it the town? Is it?
Sorry, I looked at my phone and
Yeah.
momentarily stopped listening.
So the question is. The runaround that I'm getting, we're getting. With specifically the Black Bear parking lot. Is it the, which,
Who owns the lights?
yeah, the lights,
I
the
don't-
Black Bear, the town or Terrell?
The town does not. And I do not know if it's Tyrell or the Black Bear, but you have the Black Bear manager right there.
We're responsible for maintaining the lights.
That's my understanding as well. But for example, there is a light. In the Black Bear parking lot, which if you look at it, does absolutely nothing to the Black Bear parking lot, but she's right down the Green Peak Road.
Okay, well,
But what I was told is, that's not your problem. That's,
technically, it's not our problem.
it's not your problem, it's Terrell's problem, and then Terrell kind of says, well, it was in the plan the town approved.
Oh, jeepers.
Huh?
Jeepers.
Jeepers, creepers, what else is good? I guess what I'm kind of looking at. And I can always talk to James, I talk to him all the time, is should I be dealing with James, should I be dealing with Mark, should I be dealing with you?
What do you want to do to it?
The lights are like, it's called light trespass, so
Okay.
it goes from where it is into other neighbors.
So all I gotta do is just change the direction.
Change the direction and there's like a downward facing
Yeah.
thing that goes on.
I can come talk to you later, I mean, you know what I'm
I
talking
don't
about.
think that's a problem. We can just bring somebody in with a lift. Probably quickest way to do it is Valley Run. They have a truck with a lift and we can change the direction any way you want.
Okay, and the other
But
part of
who's
it,
gonna pay?
Light field thing.
that we, you know,
Who's gonna pay?
when you see all we gotta do is bring a lift, all of a sudden it's.
Well, yeah, but
It
no,
costs more than
those
something
are the things that. I have a board meeting on Monday. I will bring up the lights. Anything you want to mention. I will be happy.
There's
to-
two issues, one obviously is the light trespass, which is one issue.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
The other issue is, and I understand why the importance of having it lit 24/7.
This is not a
24/7.
planning board issue.
Okay, I'll talk.
This is not a planning board issue. Go to the code enforcement
Okay,
officer.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
let's-
So let me, can I finish? Let me just. Because if you guys, I'm sure you guys get questions as planning board members, but something like this needs to be brought up to Dave as a code enforcement officer. And then he can direct you what to do, but it usually is, like in this case, it's a private property. The town does not maintain those lights in any way. And then, but between the property owners, Dave can determine if there's a light trespass issue that goes against our regulation or whatever it is. And he can direct you to who to talk to. So I
In all
just
fairness,
throw that
this
out
is The first I heard.
Okay, all right.
So,
Morgan will take care of it. Yeah. So I'm gonna just kind of bypass some of the work we're just gonna check in, it seems like we're going forward with that, with those work weeks, and we've got teams established. Everyone good on the team? Everyone connected? I like that. Okay, we're moving on. We discussed C1, we kind of already kind of covered that with everything that went on earlier. Any more discussion on C1? Yeah, we don't really have everyone here, so I'd like to kind of table that until next month. Any other questions on that? Mark?
He's next.
move on.
People got a tank.
I'm the next thing on the agenda. If you're gonna go down to the next thing. I just want to get that.
Thank you, Mark.
Oh, thank you.
So I have talked to Tara about what is required for a voluntary lot merger. There's a simple 1-page, 2-page form that we fill out that if you don't have any problems, it's not really an approval by the planning board, but you have to be aware that we are doing it. So property owners can combine lots together. They file an application. I don't want to call it an application because it's really, again, for approval, but it's a notice. And it's filed in the registry, and then we take that when the mappers update our tax maps, which are done every year. They will remove these lines. Okay, so the town would like to do that with this lot that we're sitting on that includes the sewer treatment plant, town hall, the DPW. The first two that we're gonna do is gonna be this one right here beside the sewer treatment plant that zigzags. And then this tiny one right here. Because right now, the actual corner of the lot is a separate tiny lot. So we wanna remove these two from the tax map. And then the Board of Selectmen voted last night to complete the purchase of lot 7 over here. So next month, as an informational thing, just like this, I'll come in and say, we've signed the purchase and sale is done, we paid the money to Tyrell and we're done. And we will merge this lot into the big lot. And the benefit of doing this is a lot of our permitting is based by the lot that you're on. With DES and, all that sort of thing, so by making it one contiguous. Then we only have one application to fill out. So
Makes a lot of sense.
So anyway, that is the voluntary lot merger, and do you have any questions?
That little triangle?
That little triangle, that's, yes, so today,
Is
the
this town property?
applications, yes. So what I'm informing you of is we're taking this line out and we're taking this line. So the only thing we have left to do is lot 7. And as soon as we purchase it, August 15th. will be done. Okay, so any questions or comments or concerns?
Makes sense.
All right, good, thank you.
Okay. Town core, we don't have anybody represents the town core. Nancy? You have anything on the town core?
Did you just ask me about town core?
Yes, I did, yeah. You have any?
No, we did not meet this month.
Okay,
We're planning on meeting next month.
okay, thank you.
Sure.
Councilor Griffin?
I think just the big thing was we did have that meeting on June 13th where Forest Service officials and BDS officials and town officials and a bunch of residents and Conservation Commission members met over by the Beaver Dams by Wellman Thor and talked about what could be done to get the stream back to its original flow. And proposal was submitted to the Forest Service to remove the 2 new dams. So that proposal was approved. And we're waiting to talk to, I guess, excavator. people,
Two contracts.
2 contractors and who will be in town early next week to get an estimate of what this might cost. And then the select board will discuss whether or not it's something that they want to.
To remove
the beaver dam. Yeah.
Are you discussing with the Beavers?
Yes.
Does the beaver attend the meeting?
Yeah.
No, we have been given a deadline of August 15th to get the work done. So we have to select contractor and do the work
In a month?
by August 15th.
The contractors, are they in town working?
Yes.
All right, good.
Well, one of them is, and one of them is said just finished working in town, but has said he's still interested in doing it.
Okay. Sure, good. See you.
Yeah, or it's easy to get here. So we will try to get 2 bids. And the select board will select one of the 2. from the-
I also attended the meeting, but it was an excellent meeting. Done a great job on putting everybody together. Very impressive dams if you haven't been up there.
It's unclear whether or not there are any beavers there right now, because after they were removed last year and they did some breaches in the dam, it pretty much looks exactly the way it did at the end of last summer. To me, layperson, that. And the biologist was kind of the same opinion, and, it would take a little bit of time to study all this stuff.
And this isn't a whole far away of not having to track the beavers. So if we remove the dams and see building them back on where the dams are, Then they're there. Hopefully. This is. We're hoping to go upstream. Anything else from you guys?
We meet next week, so.
Okay. Next. meeting For the planning. board. Let's take a look at our calendar.
Just took-
Yeah.
Mhm.
And for the 10th.
I said, I didn't mean it as a statement, I meant it as a question.
Yes. Second, third, September.
Well, but I said it as.
Yeah, and everyone make the 10th okay? That's what we're gonna do. Please do. Nancy, you're good with that? 10th, August,
My audio had cut out. I didn't hear what you said.
August 10th for the next meeting, planning board meeting, August 10th, at 8
I
a.m.
just put it on my iPad, so it's done.
Should be okay for now. Probably.
Okay. Anyone make a?
Second.
All in favor? Three. Thank you, everyone.